live today talking about game development and game dev related topics. I think we'll be taking questions later on, and we've got a couple things that we want to hit first, right? So I guess just welcome everybody. We've been just kind of blabbing and talking and all that beforehand, so it's a little strange jumping in. But yeah, welcome Andrew, welcome Jason. We were just talking about your stream, Andrew, and how I like to watch it from TV and stuff. How's that been going for you, by the way, the stream? And you still really enjoying that? You've been doing it regularly, right?
Fairly regularly. It's not on a schedule at this point, but it's been, I had the day off yesterday, so I got up in the morning and I said, I'm going to do it at 10. So I put up a thing. I'm going to do it at 10 o'clock. We're on stream, 4 hours of game development. It's fun. I like it. I did 2 days in a row, one working on assets for Infinity PBR, the next just working on the Legend of the Stones games. And that ended up being working on some assets too, because I had some code updates to make, and we had lots of discussion. Jason Story came on and was discussing things, and lots of advice from other people as well. People catching things that I could make better and teaching me a few things too. So it's fun. I enjoy it. And then after that, I mean, literally after that, I ended up going out to a Starbucks and staying outside in the nice weather and doing more work on it, and then coming back and doing more work too. So it ended up being a full day of game dev, which is always fun.
Nice. It's always fun stuff, man. I was, like I said earlier, telling you, I love just watching it. And I know Jason does too, just watching people develop and build stuff live and seeing other people go through the coding process. And like, especially when you're working from home remotely and it feels like it's one of your only interactions, right? Like the only time you get to see other people coding and working live and stuff, and kind of get in there and chat and stuff. Although that's, like I said, one of the things I don't do often enough is the actual chat, because I'm always on the damn TV watching it. So yeah, go ahead. Do you have something else you wanted to jump into, or you guys want to just start taking a look at this Humble Bundle? Because that was, I think, one of the most interesting things, and I can't remember which one of you sent it to me. It might have been both of you sent over the Humble Bundle deal that's out there now, which is a Unity. What is it called? The
Fantasy bundle or something
Fantasy
like that?
bundle. That's it. Yeah, I was gonna say RPG or something bundle, but yeah,
It
it's
might be.
a giant bundle full of just crazy stuff. And I mean, it's not sponsored or anything. I just want to make sure that everybody knows, like, this is just a nuts deal that I thought we kind of had to share, because
Yeah.
I'll pop it up on the screen. Um, Even for a lot of the people that I know that got this deal already had most of the stuff in there, and they just saw extra things in there that were kind of,
There's at least 4 things in here which are worth their full prices. Like just four of them specifically alone that I would recommend this entire thing for.
yeah, at least, right? And it's only $25 and you get all 28. So they have the small bundle at $1. Did you guys take a look at this one at all? The $1 version of the bundle?
No, I just bought the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I just go straight to the bottom, pick the big one.
Yeah.
That's generally what I would recommend too. But they had this bundle for $1 where you get some art. So I guess if you're really tightly strapped, it's still worth it. And then the 11 item one makes no sense at all, because for another 34 cents you get all 28 of these things. Do you want should we just go over the ones that we think are maybe in that top range, or those top 4 that are definitely worth getting, and maybe briefly talk about some of these other assets real quick? And I was be kind of curious to see in chat what everybody else's favorite assets are. If there was something in here that you think is more than worth the purchase price, just drop it in chat, or something you're kind of curious about too. I just kind of want to know. So yeah, you want to just take it with maybe which one you think is the best asset out of all these, or the one that everybody or most people should have?
Well, I think if you're this is my asterisk, and I've said this a few times. If you're not creating scripts for other people, if you're not a contractor, if it is your project, you are doing your own thing, Odin by far is one of the most valuable assets you can get. It should just be part of your project. It's one of those ones which, like, if you're willing to take the time to understand what it's doing, if you use 10% of it, it's like it'll massively save your time. It's the amount of there's just even I've said it before. There's one particular thing it does, which is anytime you've ever put a scriptable asset reference in your project. So you've got a script and it's got a field for a scriptable object, and you drag that in. you have to double click or go to that scriptable object to view its inspector. They've got one thing called an inline inspector, and that basically means if you've got a list of scriptable objects, all of them could be edited from the same inspector. You don't have to leave the inspector for the object you're in to find the associated scriptable object. And given that the main way I use scriptable objects is as a settings file, being able to edit the settings for the thing I'm in line saves, may not seem like much, but it might save 20 seconds every single time I ever want to tweak any setting anywhere. So that one alone is fantastic, but the asterisk I said is unfortunately I can't use it because the majority of the scripts that I make I end up giving to clients, and I can't force them to buy an asset, even if it is relatively cheap on a bundle, just for the sake of integrating it with my stuff. So it's a pity. I wish Unity would buy it so I don't have to keep writing my own stuff every time.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'd say I generally recommend it too. Odin's a pretty damn cool tool. The only reason I don't use it very often in videos is because it's the same. I just can't require people to buy it and use it to do things or to follow along, you know. But outside of that, if I'm working on a project and I have control over it, it's one of the things that I like to pull in and just give to the whole team or have the whole team use. And Andrew, do you use Odin at all? I can't remember.
I have owned it, I think, for years, and I've never used it. For the same reason that Jason warned about, I can't. I want to use it, but every time I make my own projects, I want to make stuff for other people to use and put on the App Store, whether it be free or not free, and I can't use Odin for that. So if I get into using Odin and get used to using Odin, I know I'm going to like it. I know I'm going to make use of it, but then it will, hold me back in some way. So I think I will. I was saying yesterday, actually, or the other day, I will probably end up using it for the big RPG game because there are things about it that seem valuable, serialization and other things. However, that might come later in the process for very specific cases.
I got to write a note of this too. It's an interesting one to remember, think about. So what's the next one you would say that's most important? You said there were 4 that you think were kind of worth the price of admission alone. What
I might even say 5. So I would say number 2 is definitely Bakery. Bakery is one of those ones where, I'll be honest, I slept on that one for a long time. I saw it as like, it's just another baking tool. Unity's new one is pretty good. It's GPU based. It's fast. I don't need to use this one. Until you use Bakery, and Bakery is like night and day. Like you need to get both Bakery and the preview asset, but effectively it's GPU light baking in a way that's sort of it's finally it delivers on the promise that Unity made, which is you can just fly around your scene and it'll just bake stuff as you go. Like you don't have to keep pausing and going through this tedious long light baking process. It's actually like really fast. It's it doesn't get in your way, which I think is the first time I've ever seen that. Even with the GPU light baking in Unity at the moment, it's still like it gets in your way. You still have to stop and go through the process and wait for the baking at times. And there's many a time I've just said, I was going to go make a coffee. But Bakery was introduced to me by an artist I work with who uses it all the time, and he swears by it. And I finally saw why, which is like, if you're doing lots of iterations on a look of a scene, so not just baking it once, but if you're going through and like really trying to tweak the lighting and get it to look soft and make sure the bounces are right, and you're not getting those weird leaks where you've got like the single faces and it's drawing those little strip lines of shadows that get really annoying. In short, every project I've done light baking with Bakery, it both looks softer and it renders faster. I don't use it in everything because it has limitations. There's some, I think it's, I can't remember the exact thing, but there's a couple of different environments it won't work with. But for most cases, I've found if I'm trying to build a shiny scene, I'll probably use Bakery.
Yeah, it looks great. I haven't actually used it myself. We were talking about this in the architecture Q&A call earlier, though, and somebody had mentioned that you highly recommended it, so it was worth checking out. So I think I'm going to have to try this one out myself, too. Play with Bakery and the real-time preview thing. It's just not one I've done.
The real-time preview itself just looks really nice. Like, it's so cool seeing your stuff, because it's so... I don't know about everyone else doing this, but it's really frustrating when you move a couple things and then you go, cool, there's this big dark blob on the floor, and I now have to like wait until the whole thing rebakes and everything, and it takes so long. And that's fine if you're like, it depends what your goals are. But I find that I'm not very good at that visual aspect of development. And so I need to see it. I need to like render it, look at it and go, yeah, don't like that, put it back. And this process is very slow. And if you have to go through a large bake every time, you'll be there forever. But if you can just move something, have it just rebake that area around you, and then sort of do it again, and you can tweak it and move it, and then move to a different area, it lets you sort of piecemeal design the visual look of your scene in a way you can't do if you're kind of going for the standard bacon area, move some stuff, bacon area, move some stuff, which takes a lot longer.
I've never used. Oh, you're muted, Jason.
Yeah, I was saying I'm just really terrible and slow at lighting and making things look good in general. So usually what I do is I sit there and I struggle with it for like half an hour to an hour and then lose my mind and call up an artist. I'm like, can you make this good? Because even when I get it fast, I still can't make it look pretty. Or at least
Yeah.
nowhere near as pretty as I expect it to be.
Well,
My
I will say the
standards are way
caveat
higher
is,
than my skills.
well, that's where the caveat will be, is I don't really play with it myself. I know how, because an artist I work with kind of put it in the project, and so I begrudgingly had to kind of go, fine, I'll learn how it works. And now I get it and I quite like it, but I tend not to be the one who sets it up myself. So I'm in the same boat as you. I tend to let better people than I set that up. But if I want to tweak stuff, I can do it myself.
And there was a question following up there, which I think you kind of mentioned in there, that you think that bakery generally is better than the new progressive baker, or at least
Yeah,
far as you
I
tell.
mean, I think they look pretty similar. Maybe it's subjective. I kind of feel it's a little bit more diffuse with bakery. But the main thing is just speed. It's objectively faster because the way it works is it lets you progressively bake, which means you can kind of work on areas and bake as you go. And so whether or not, like, have a look yourself and see if you think that the way it looks is any drastically different. But for me, it's more about workflow. Like, the I've said this too before, but if you lose 30 seconds in development, you don't lose 30 seconds, you lose 5 minutes. Every time something slows you down, you will get distracted, you'll go do something else. And that something else will always take 5 to 10 times longer than you think. So a process like baking, like, if the baking takes an extra 30 seconds or a minute, you are losing 5 to 10 minutes for every one of those 30 seconds to a minute as you go and watch a stream or read some comments or check your emails. And so the cost of a slow baker could be 2 hours of your day. Like, it doesn't feel like it, but it'll add up. If you actually track your time and watch it back afterwards, that's how long it can take you. So having something that bakes fast, like, it's well worth its cost.
Yeah, and that multiplies out like for everything. All those slow processes, it's not just you; it's you and everybody else on your team that's following those processes. You're all gonna fall into that same hole. So important one to catch. Just want to say a quick thanks on the super chat. There's no question there or anything, but thanks, Eduardo. Oh, just pop it up. You want to jump to the next one?
The next one I think is a sleeper hit. It's one of my favorites too. So I don't usually use kind of graphing tools very often. I like code. I work in and I think in code. But of the ones I've used Behavior Designer, Playmaker, all the others, except for one or two, really. I've used most of them. Node Canvas was always my favorite. It was the one that I found myself enjoying the most. At its core, it's a behavior tree. And what I like about it is very clinically a behavior tree. It follows all of the conventions. If you read up on behavior tree design, it uses the same naming conventions, the same structures. It's kind of easy to work with. It's not easy to learn. Like, to be honest, you have to actually understand behavior trees and know the different kinds of nodes and how to do different sequencing and stuff. But once you do, it's very nice. It's one of the more visually appealing ones. And one of my favorite things about it is it feels designed for programmers. So you use something like Playmaker, and that's got that visual scripting node thing where they want you to use like write your code in it. Similarly with Bolt, right? It kind of feels like they want you to write your code using it. Node Canvas feels like it augments your workflow. So you actually write your own nodes in code with a few lines, and then you build a behavior tree out of your nodes. So for me, it's it doesn't sort of lock you in a vendor way like a lot of other assets do. So it doesn't feel as opinionated as something like Playmaker. If you use Playmaker, you kind of your project becomes a Playmaker project. If you use Node Canvas, you can just pick one entity, an AI of some kind, pop Node Canvas on it, do a blackboard of variables, and it works well. It's easy to visually debug, and the rest of your code base isn't sort of locked into using those features. So I would use it in cases where I have a very AI scripted thing and I want to see its behavior in cycles using behavior trees. And yeah, it's probably my favorite for that task. But again, it's code heavy. It's not going to be as like user friendly as say Behavior Designer, which feels like they've built you the nodes already for steering behaviors and all the other stuff. Node Canvas is a lot more workflow oriented. If you know what you want to make, but you want to just give yourself a visual outlet to debug it and have an easy way to have variables talk between different AI, but you're writing it yourself, I think Node Canvas is my favorite for that.
Yeah, it seems pretty powerful. How do you like behavior trees overall for AI?
I think they're pretty good. I find that they're really like they're one of the most powerful ways to do AI because it's so kind of modular. It allows you to really um, stack the behaviors because it at a basic level it effectively means you have something that you want to do and you have a bunch of things that can happen and you hit each node and it'll keep going until one of them passes. So for example, it's if you had a locked door, you might have an AI try to open it, fails, tries to jiggle the lock, fails, tries to pick the lock, maybe that succeeds, and then it moves on and does the next thing. And so it lets you build these sort of sequences so your AI knows what to do next. There's different kinds of nodes, and it effectively comes down to it gives the AI a way to try multiple things out, and it lets you very easily build behaviors like, say, this is a search for enemy, this is a search for player, this is a get to safe area, this is a go eat some food. And then you can start to structure quite easily try this, then do this, then if this happens, do this. And you can sort of build out and reason out your logic quite nicely. But again, you have to know what you're doing because there's different nodes where it follows like a mathematical function. And again, I'm not a math person. Math confuses me a lot. So you have to really, like, at least for me, you have to really understand how it's going to cyclically run through this because it's not going to run through it in a way like flowcharts feel very easy. Flowcharts are just if this, go here, go here, then if this, do this. It doesn't do
Like
that.
a
It
state
actually
machine.
exactly, yeah. But this runs through this kind of like weird cyclical thing, and then it stops, and then it goes up, and then it'll come down, and then it'll do this cyclical thing for a bit. Then it'll go over here and do this. So it'll be hard for you to reason about it first if you've not used behavior trees. But as far as like changing your mind and saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if the AI decided to go and pick up any dropped SMGs whenever it's low health or something?" Like you can bake those kinds of really cool decisions into your AI a lot easier than you could with an FSM or something. So I think it's very cool. I don't tend to need them as often because most of my projects tend to be a lot more prototype stuff for clients. I tend not to get into big heavy AI things very often. But it's definitely one of the ones I would look at if I was going down that road.
Yeah, I think it's good for solving those those kind of dynamic AI problems or the ones that feel a little bit more dynamic where it's making a lot of decisions based on what's going on in the environment, what other things are doing, less on, following instructions in order where things that use like a state machine fit really well or they have a simpler flow or they have a flow that you want heavier control over that's probably less relying on other things. I've always found that behavior trees are also just difficult to explain to
Yeah.
designers and often to other programmers too. Just kind of getting that flow, the logic of it into your head. It's not the easiest thing to always map. Some people are really good at it, but most I'd say not great at mapping them in at least
Well,
natively. So it takes a little effort.
here's a friendly article that explains it quite nicely. This is one of my favorite resources for reasoning out how they work. Um, And while you're bringing that up, just as a side note, to answer the question, Node Canvas versus Playmaker, I think they're very different tools for very different jobs.
Yeah.
Playmaker is if you're daunted by code and you just want to jump in with some visual scripting, it can be quite friendly and easy to get started. Node Canvas is if you're already doing it via programming, but some stuff is just simply hard to debug. Behaviors in particular, like how can you watch an AI walk around a scene and make decisions and go, what is he thinking? I don't understand what he's doing. It can be very hard to debug a behavior tree. And so Node Canvas gives you visibility into the decision making of an AI effectively. So I would say it's got more features than that, but I would say that Node Canvas is used for that purpose, while Playmaker is more, I want to build logic but not have to dive really deep into syntax for code.
Right. Yeah, they solve the problem in totally different ways. A state machine versus a behavior tree. So this was the tutorial about it.
Yeah, this is just a general guide on behavior trees and how they work, and sort of explains how it's a bit confusing, talks about what it does, talks about the different types of flows of how you would approach solving problems and things. It should clear up some of that confusion, I would imagine.
Cool. We'll drop this in the description in the chat too, so everybody else can go read it later because it looks extremely long and detailed. Yeah, it's really detailed. Nice.
As for the differences between Node Canvas, Behavior Designer, and Opsiv, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, as they say. All three work. They're perfectly fine. At the end of the day, you can write your own nodes, so it doesn't actually matter. Like, you can effectively use all of them as a visual tool and then just write your own code inside of it. The difference, I would say, is Behavior Designer is pre-kitted towards AI. Like, they'll just give you a bunch of really nice things for AI that'll set it up for you. But I also find it's clunkier. So I find that if you're newer to the concepts, you'll get further along faster using Behavior Designer. But I find I don't like authoritative systems. I don't like stuff which will kind of require me to use their solution. And Opsiv's even more like that. I find Opsiv stuff in general, like once you put Opsiv in your project in any capacity, it's an Opsiv project now. You are doing everything the Opsiv way. That could be good if you're going to buy into everything they're doing. But something I caution against is what tends to happen if you use a very opinionated asset is your game starts to get designed around the features they provide you, not the features you want in your game. So rather than sitting down and going, ooh, I would love to have X, Y, and Z mechanics and features, you end up going, what features does this tool give me? I'll expose them in my game effectively. So I find if you're prototyping or you want a lot of the legwork done for you, but it's not as customizable, Behavior Designer and Opsiv will get you there faster. Node Canvas is just a visual tool. It's like another debugger. It's a second tool in your back pocket that makes seeing how code works better. And again, they all do the same thing. You can make all of them do exactly the same thing if you really try. I just find for my workflow, I like something that's like an extra screwdriver rather than an entire like farming out to somebody else to do the work for me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I want to try it out now. I just need an issue where I need a behavior tree. Maybe I'll pop it into my RTS. Might make sense there as AI logic. I got to see how the AI logic's all kind of put together there, but it could be a good place for that, or a good place to experiment with that one.
It may not be a great argument, but I will admit, I just like how it looks. Like compared to all the others, Playmaker looks dated now. It's not their fault. It's a very old asset at this stage. So, but it has an older look to it. Behavior Designer feels very clinical for solving this problem. It's a very academic tool. Node Canvas is just well made. It's very care has been made to make the nodes look nice. The way it indicates connections is very nice. It has nice smooth lines. It's got these little movement icons. Like everything about it is just a joy to use. And I think that's another thing that's overlooked a lot. If you're using a tool on a regular basis, how much you enjoy using that tool is a factor to take into consideration. And sometimes I will favor a tool I will enjoy using over something that might be better because I'll enjoy using it more and I will then actively engage with its features more. If I don't enjoy using a tool, I'll actively not open it because it'll be a pain in the ass to open. So I'm not saying the others are a pain. I'm just saying that on balance, I think Node Canvas looks and feels nicer to use, but that's a personal preference.
Yeah. No, I think when you started talking about bad tools, it just kind of brought back flashbacks of all the times that you build tools for people and then they don't use them because your tool sucks and you don't realize it at the time that there's an issue with the tool that's preventing them from using it, or that there's just like some little tiny thing in there that's making it a nightmare for them, like they open it up and it takes half an hour to start and you didn't know that because it doesn't happen to you. But it's like, I mean, I've run into situations where like people had not enough RAM, their connection was slow, their account had some different data, or the app just didn't do the thing that they wanted it to do properly, and it sucks.
I've seen something as simple as just one click too many, or
Huh?
a pop-up. Like I've definitely mentioned that story before, where I've made tools where I put a nice friendly pop-up message at the end of some process, and people just got so fed up of seeing the damn pop-up message they stopped using the tools, because it's like it's an exhausting extra step that makes the app annoying to use. So it is something to consider.
Yep, you gotta dog food it. You gotta use your own tools and try them out. And feel like if you're building tools and you don't use them, it's really easy to make a mess of them. So it's always good to see game developers who actually use the stuff that they're building. Use the tools that you're putting together and that you're giving out to other people. So
It's also on tools, the risk of knowing your tool so well that you forget that others don't know how to use it. And I know I fall into that category, because especially with my game modules, it's the only real tool I have in my library, but I use it for my game and I know exactly how I want to use it and what it can do and all the different ways it can be used in different ways that aren't as clear, and maybe like, oh, you could do some other thing with this and create a whole new system that has nothing to do with the original purpose. But explaining that to people and showing them how to do it in an effective way, that communication is very difficult.
And it happens to everybody. Like I normally take pride in the fact that I've opened up client project, because one thing that people don't realize too, if you do a client project as a contractor, you will sometimes, and I say sometimes, I mean at least a couple times a year, I'll get a message from a client that says, "Hey, remember that thing you made for us 3 years ago? Well, we're still using it for various different shows and events. We just want to add this one feature, or can you change this thing, or can you add this extra language?" And so you have to open up a Unity 2015 or like an old version project, and you have to like build it to the latest version, add a few tweaks and changes, and move on. And oftentimes you'll forget the systems you wrote 3 years ago to solve some problem that you don't even remember solving. And so if your systems are good, it is genuinely a joy to open an old project and go, oh god, how did I even make this? I had a sequencing system I wrote that did the oh, I just do that. Cool, it works. Oh my god, I'm so happy. Pass me as a genius. I solved it. But in contrast, the opposite happens too. I found it very recently. I opened up a project and I had a setting system where you could like dynamically change settings, and there was like title cards and things, and the title cards would automatically update based on sequences, and the clients wanted to change it. So I made it an external text file where it would like automatically place titles at certain timestamps relative to the text file, but I didn't document it well. So then when it was having an issue, when I was asked to come back and add a feature to it, I bit myself in the ass. I had to come back and go, what is it? Is it a dash or an @ sign? And what was the delimiter for this? And I was really angry it passed me because I didn't really think it through as something to come back to. And I did the same thing even a few weeks ago. I was building a setting system and I left it for 2 weeks, and I came back and I went to reuse it and I was like, oh, I hate using this. I forgot that I wrote it. Now coming back, I get to use it fresh as a consumer. And as a consumer of my own code, I'm like, no, this is going to be redesigned. I don't like how I did this. And that's something you just have to be honest with yourself and go, do you like using the code you wrote? Most of the time, yes. Sometimes, really not. And so that's a case of me having to stop and go, the approach I took is the wrong one. Time to go back to the drawing board. So
yeah, it's an important step to follow. Actually deleting the bad stuff and redoing it when you don't like using your own stuff, instead of forcing yourself to use it and forcing other people to use it. The worst is forcing other people to use it though, because then they won't want more stuff from you. So giving them terrible tools, giving them pop-ups after every item they scan. Yeah.
yeah, who do that?
That is definitely one of the best stories though, because it's like you add in a little nice to have thing, like, oh look, this is super nice. Like, look at this little confirmation. Like, how many times do you see in this confirmation every day? Gotta keep that in mind. Like, you
Yeah.
see it once because you only run this thing once as the developer. You gotta look at it from their point of view.
And I've learned that as a good guide for animations. And Google have this very explicitly in the documentation. When you're designing a UI, it can be really tempting to have these really cool swishy animations. And when you design it and you have this like action complete and a nice animated arrow and everything swishes, you're like, that's really cool. That's a well organized thing. Until you picture a client doing that task 12 times a day and watching your stupid ass 20-second animation over and over and over, and they start to hate your application. So the guidelines are a really slow animation is 0.5 seconds. That is the slowest animation you should ever do, according to Google's thing. Now, there's performative animations where you're actively doing like a end of a large load session. Sure, you can kind of fudge those numbers. But if you're talking about interactive, anything that you're engaging with, anything that's responsive to a user action, half a second is the max. You should aim for 0.2 to 0.3 seconds. That's the general 200, 300 milliseconds is kind of the go-to mark for speed of animations, because what you think is fast, you look at it and go, that's instant, that's too fast, but it's not. If you picture people's reactions, like swiping through your app, clicking lots of stuff, you don't want to waste their time. And so that's one of those life lessons. Like, whatever task you do, don't look at it as this nice, neat isolation you do at once. Pretend you have to do 100 of these in a row and ask yourself if it still feels faster, intuitive. And is there a way to make it faster or easier if you're doing a bulk operation?
An example of that could be like opening up your spell book in game, right? The animation that brings up your spells in UI. For anybody who's unsure what types of animations you're talking about, like you hit the button and it pops that up. If that takes 2 seconds and looks super cool, it's neat the first time, but the second, 10th, third, 10th time, it's just obnoxious, right?
Yeah, and another example, I had a friend of mine who's making a game, and he has this thing where whenever you collect an ore, it would show up in your inventory, and it would have a nice little pop-up going, collected 5 of this, collected 5 of this, and it would queue up a big stack of them, and so you'd collect, you'd be collecting a bunch of things, and after you walk away, you'd still be there for the next 40 seconds seeing these little tiny pop-ups because it's queued up all of these little, and I'm just like, dude, you have to get rid of those. Like, you can't, they're frustrating, they're not helpful, they don't add information, and so bulk stacking those and then sending 1 or 2 events, much better.
Yeah. There's an example in the Unity editor that I think many of us have faced, and maybe there's a shortcut key that I don't know. So I'm hoping I can learn something if there is. Checking out audio clips though. You click on an audio clip, have to move your mouse over and click play, and then click the next one, and then click play. Click the next one, click play. So if you're going through a list of 40 audio clips, or in some of the asset packages, 9,000, you're going to be doing a lot of dragging and clicking, or moving your mouse and clicking just to hear each one. And it becomes cumbersome where you don't really want to listen to them in Unity. You just want to go to your desktop and just, hit spacebar and down arrow to hear each one. And that, to me, is like one of those things where it's like, okay, in this use case, when somebody is going to be using this type of file, what do they really want to do? Whether it be collecting ore in a game or playing an audio clip, if you're going through audio clips, you're going to want to listen to them. Most likely, there's a good chance that you're going to want to listen to them. So there should be an option to easily listen to them when you click, like something, option click, shift click, and it just plays or something.
And same with particle systems. Like, that's one of those things where if you're building an asset and you've got like 50 different particles, like the demo scene in something like those Toon particle packs or realistic particle packs, they're not just for show. I don't know of anybody else here, but I will frequently open the demo scene and I will click through as a way of searching for one I like, going, doesn't fit. Oh, that one's good. And then go find the prefab, copy it, and paste it. So that's a really useful thing. And as Philip mentioned, one of the worst examples of this is games with bloody DLC pop-ups. How many of us have bought a Ultimate Edition or a Masters Edition or something, and you open this game and it's like added DLC A, added DLC B, added DLC C, and you're just clicking yes as you wait for every suit, every outfit, everything to just finish the pop-up before you can start this game you've never played before. It's infuriating. If you've got a whole load of unlockables of some kind, stack them up, show a message, list them, and don't make people sit there for 5 minutes going through your pop-ups.
And it looks like Krugisa XD has given me the answer to my problem, which I was thinking might be the case. Apparently there's an auto play next to the play button for audio clips. So if you click the next one, it auto plays.
I did not know that.
I was thinking that
way.
there might be an option because it's so, such an issue. But there you go. So some Unity dev at Unity Technologies helped us all out, and thank you for telling us, because I didn't know that either.
That is awesome.
I will say though, here's a random tip. I actually don't use either of those. I use a little tool called Soundly. Soundly is a plugin, like a separate app for audio management, and it lets you now. It's a subscription service. I don't get the subscription because it's too expensive. They should really give me a single purchase license to use my own stuff. They're trying to sell a platform, which is very annoying. I really hate this new everything's a subscription model nonsense, whatever. But as an app, it's fantastic. You can download this and load up like 2,000 of your own clips, and then it's such an easy way to scrub, search, play, and find. And when you play a song you like, you can actually select a section in the song and drag it out of the app into Unity, and it'll automatically cut, trim, grab the portion, make a new file, and drop it into Unity. So if you're doing, like I saw you doing the replica voice stuff, if rather than dragging it into Unity, if you put all of these in a folder, had Soundly pick up the files from that folder, you could scrub and search them in Soundly. And then if you wanted just like a word or two, you could like highlight the waveform, play it back till you have just the clipped section you want, drag that into Unity, and it'll auto cut clip and give you just that little bit of the thing as a WAV file. And it's just really handy. So
that sounds super cool. I mean, that's one of those things that for the repetitive tasks that you're going to do a lot. When you're going to do it once, you're probably going to do it a lot. And exporting, clipping, trimming, reformatting audio is not fun for anyone. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's not really like Audacity. Audacity is like a proper audio editor. This is more an audio library. It's just a way for you to search. If anyone's ever used Adobe Bridge, it's like Adobe Bridge, but much more lightweight as a simple solution to search your audio files. Yeah, I recommend it. I think it's pretty good. These days, I do a lot of my audio editing in Audition. But if you're, and just for people who joined late, if you have, like most of us, a large collection of audio files that you've gotten from asset packs on the asset store, it can be difficult finding a sound effect. And if you're looking for it, the way I do it is I put them all in a big folder, named by the producer, and then I open it in this app here called Soundly, and then I can search and play back and tag them myself. And then once I've customized them to the way I like, it's much easier for me to search and find sound effects and drop into the project. So.
Okay, and what's the difference on that unlimited monthly plan versus the free one? Is it just the number of files you can put in that folder, or
the main limit is in the free version you can only put 2,500 files, which sounds like a lot, but trust me, if you're getting like small WAV files of loads of different audio clips, that's not enough. It really isn't. And so what I find mildly frustrating, but it's unfortunately the way it has to work, is I have a different folder for music than for sound effects. And so I will open the music folder in Soundly, in other words, clear the library and reopen it as music, just so I can sort through and search the music stuff. And then if they want to do sound effects, I have to clear the library and go and open it. And it's annoying. It's an unnecessary limitation. Like, I would pay for the privilege of having unlimited local files, but not the other stuff if they offered it, but they don't. So that's a bit frustrating. And like 14 a month isn't that much, but I already have like 9 or 10 apps I use constantly as part of my workflow. And so the truth is, I don't do audio stuff enough to add on top of this. Like, I pay that much alone for Epidemic Sound, which gives me unlimited sound effects, which is great. I don't need another thing just to manage those sounds. And then I'm using Eagle as another platform I use for managing my images. And I've got, like, if I was to just take all the subscriptions and services, it's not worth adding just one more, even if it is a relatively cheap one. So I would buy it outright, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It seems more like the kind of thing you would do if that was like your key job at a studio. right? Like, or you're
100%.
in
Yeah.
charge of audio, or you're heavy in the design side, and you're doing a lot of the audio stuff, but it doesn't seem so much. It seems
Yeah.
like kind of thing you would have somebody at the studio do, but definitely not all the programmers.
Like, for example, there's another one called the Noun Project, which is just a subscription service to icons that you can drag in instantly into Photoshop. It's great. I've used it in the past, but most of the time I don't do that much with icons. So I
Right.
use something called Nucleo icons. It's a one-time subscription I paid years ago, and or one-time fee I paid, and I have access to thousands of icons, and I use that most of the time. Now, if I find myself on a client project that's very icon heavy, like I'm doing a mobile app, I will subscribe for a few months, so it makes my life 10 times easier. But this whole, like, there's so many feature or bespoke apps where I can't have 20 subscription services. it's just too
I'm
many
with you.
things.
Yeah.
It's
I
called
still
there's
occasionally find ones that I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I had that. I haven't used that in months.
Yep.
And you're like, oh crap, or like with old organizations and stuff. It's like
Yeah.
totally space on them because they're useful at first, and then you realize, or you don't realize that you stopped using it.
Yeah, I recently found out I was paid 2 months. It's only $5 per month, but still $10 for a some RPG map making tool online map making tool that I tried out. Was thinking of making a video about, and then I was like, nah. And
I
then
did the same.
yeah, I forgot to cancel. But it's called subscription fatigue. There's an actual term. I think that's the official term for that feeling you get when you realize you've got way too many subscriptions and it's suddenly costing you a lot of money and you don't have time to use all those subscriptions. And so you're like, what do I do? I got to cancel them all.
I have a question. Real quick for you, Andrew. Does the asset store, or has the asset store ever done like a subscription thing where you like subscribe and just get like a, here, kind
No.
of like, you know how Epic and all of them do, like give away a free thing, but give away like a thing on some
Oh
sort of a
yeah.
package,
If
like a subscription one? I
I'm
remember
sure
there
some
used to be like a
people
free pro one,
there's
right?
that was level 11. That was years ago. And I was
I
part of
remember that. Yeah, I
yeah,
was
so
part of
that
that as
was
well. Like, that was good.
if you were a pro, you would get 4 free assets per month and then 10, especially for 50% off if you were pro, only for pro members. And
And
I
you also had discounts on the asset store too. You had a consistent discount of a certain amount for most other assets
that
too.
was a different one. That was a different
Oh,
yeah. So this one was just the 4 free and then 50% off 10 unique ones. And I had my bomber bug was in that once. And there were 3,500 free downloads. So that gives you some sense of how many pro users were using the asset store, I guess, and willing to click a button to get something for free. So,
and
I'm sure a
wanted that
lot.
specific one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I got no reviews from it, no ratings from it. One person at a Unite conference said, "Oh yeah, I got that, and I just opened it up last week, and I'm going to use it." But that's the only feedback that I got that any of those 3,500 people actually used the product, and there was no bump in revenue, no anything, no new customers, nothing. So there's that's and they got
Yeah.
rid of that after a year or something. And the other one you were talking about was the discount for anyone subscribed. They get, what was it, 5%, 10%, some percent off of all, not all assets, just a bunch of assets though, like thousands of assets, but not
Yeah.
all assets. And that's not around anymore. But for a subscription to specific assets, they don't do. And I think like I've seen other publishers have asked about that. I've seen on the publisher forum and stuff, and I think it would be too many subscriptions, right? Because subscription fatigue is a real thing. Do you really want to subscribe to Gaia and to Odin and to Vegetation Studio and to whatever and to this and that, and then all of a sudden you're paying $200 a month for things that you're like, but I only use this once every 3 months, and so it doesn't make any sense. But instead, what you've seen more of is like Gaia does this, and a bunch more are doing it now, where they do annual upgrades for the latest major release. So you can pay $20 more or whatever to get Gaia 2022 when 2022 comes out, and then you get all that feature set and support from the next year. And I think that
and I like that option because
yeah.
there's a lot of assets. It really works well for things like IDEs and plugins, because if you don't care about the new features, just use the unsupported older version you paid for last year. If you want the new features, you pay for the privilege. And I think that's a fair compromise. New development costs money for the team. You pay them for the new features. Old development, they pay for support up to a certain point. Works for everybody. I do admit, though, I can see why that happened, because a great example is Humble released that Humble Monthly. Now, I love it because it's a silly thing, but you pay 120 for the year or something, and then you forget about it. And then every month you get a little message saying, oh, here's 10 games, pick a few that you want. I'm like, cool, that's, but just like you said, I've taken my games every month as like a nice little box, like a gift box thing. I haven't played most of them, if any of them really, because it's just like people like clicking the free button, and it's psychologically safe to feel free because you paid for it once and forgot about it, and now it's like, oh, I get free games every month. It's a nice dopamine hit, but it isn't really, you're not engaging with the content. And I've had to learn the valuable lesson of not just subscribing and forgetting about it. There's certain things I will, like, for example, I think education is the one thing just always worth paying for. I have a Pluralsight account, and I will always have a Pluralsight account. It's like $300 for the year or something. But they've changed their pricing model, and I've been subscribed to them for so long that I'm on the older model. And if I change, I get the more expensive price. If I just stick with this for the rest of my life, I get the cheaper one. And I'm going to do that because I think Pluralsight is one of the most valuable things I've ever used. It's taught me probably the most of any platform. So there's a few things I will always keep. Writer as well. Like, I use Writer so much now that I just, going to some other editor will lose so much productivity. It's not worth the cost. So I'm just going to keep those two. But there's very few.
Writer gets cheaper over time too. I know. I found. So I signed up after Jason Weimann. You mentioned Writer years ago in one of the courses that I signed up for, and I was like, all right, it was a 30-day trial or 60-day trial or whatever, and I was like, all right, let me give it a try. And now instantly, I use 1% of the features, but that 1% is enough to keep me subscribed because it saves so much just time, raw time. And but to the point of, like, there's things that you always subscribe to. I was subscribed to GameTextures.com for 2 years, 3 years. I don't even know how many years, but a long time, just because whenever I needed something, it was just there. And it was essentially unlimited. Like, I wasn't going to spend time to use all the credits I had. It was just going to too much clicking. And so just whenever I needed something, though, I could go there and grab a texture and bring it into Painter and start using it. Same with Substance Painter. I mean, they come with their library subscription, comes with the Painter subscription. But that was another one where it's software with the library, and it's just the value there is, I'll pay $20 a month for it because.
And that's the other thing too, is keep in mind with subscriptions, a lot of them offer the pay monthly or pay annually. And if that's the case, yes, it's subscription, but it doesn't have to be subscription, right? So sometimes I will look at it and go, it is subscription. They're looking for $5 a month, but like, take that off the table and go, if you had to pay 60, 70 as a one-time fee for the year, is it worth it? And in that case, it's a very easy yes, oftentimes. So ask yourself, like, again, Epidemic Sound, I do for sound effect stuff. I use, there's so many little small things that I have subscriptions to, like Storyblocks, I think I subscribe to at the moment. But there's very many little tiny things like this. Providing it's under $100, oftentimes you will get $100 worth of value from whatever subscription service, probably, if you're using it in a professional capacity. So I don't normally mind. It's not even about that. It's more about the idea of, is it something you will use a lot? Like, again, icons, $100 for the year to have access to icons. Sometimes saving an hour of your time, not having to search for it, is easier than, and that alone is worth the money. Take sound effects, for example. Going on to freesound.org, it's fine, but there's a lot of crap on freesound.org. Let's be honest. There's a lot of low quality, badly edited stuff. And that's fine if it's a free prototype project. If it's a client project, I'm not going to put them through that. And so if I have to pay $100 once to save me 45 minutes of searching for good sounds for a project, that's already paid for itself one time on one project. And if I pay for the annual subscription, I don't have to think about it again next time it comes up. So I'm not saying don't do subscriptions. I'm saying just evaluate to yourself the total cost for the year, and do you think it'll save you that much of your time / your rates or money for that amount? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no.
Time value is often very difficult to gauge for independents, especially those of us who aren't necessarily making real money. Like, we're not making a client project, we're doing a game for ourselves. And so we think, okay, well, I could do this myself. I don't have to pay $30 for this asset, whether it's an asset or a subscription. I could do that myself. And the truth is, yeah, you could. You could code that yourself. You could not do node canvas. You can roll your own behavior tree thing, or you could just code something real quick. But if you get node canvas, then you're going to save how many hours, and how much time is that worth? It's very difficult to gauge your time when you're not being paid hourly by yourself, right? But you got to make that decision. And I think oftentimes you're going to spend less time if you get the tool or the subscription than you will otherwise, especially if it's something like art that you can reuse over and over. It's like a good pair of pants. If you're going to wear that good pair of pants for the next 10 years, you can pay $300 for it. It's totally worth it.
Sorry, guys. I was just emailing JetBrains to see if I can give away writer codes. Got into it. I was thinking, yeah, I want to see if we can just maybe occasionally give some away on the stream for people who want to try them out. One of my favorite podcasts always gives away codes in their emails. So I thought, hey, why not? So I just had to email them while you guys are going on there.
Yeah, that's a good tool. I like it, Writer, a lot.
It's yeah, by far my favorite, and it comes up every time we start talking about tools.
One of the questions was which icon packs and stuff I use, so I thought I would demonstrate this, for example. So I bought years ago, I'm talking nearly like 8 years ago at this stage, this, which is Nucleo app. It's basically 31,000 icons, and it's got this cool little built-in app that lets you pick material design style, outline style, various different things, and then customize them and choose background colors. You can build a bunch of bulk icons and export them. It's really cool. It's really valuable and great for, like, if I need a prototype for a client and I need a bunch of icons. Works great, really nice. But there is one problem with this, which is the app, if you're prototyping stuff real quick, I'm not going to lie, it's a pain in the ass. Because the way the export function for this app works is you click the icons you want, you build like a project thing, and you export a zip file where it'll export it in folders based on the icon sizes. So the X4s, the X2s, it's kind of preemptively designed around building mobile apps. And so it gives you nice multiple size of resolutions for different devices, which is, again, great if that's what you're building. If, like me, you're oftentimes putting some icons into Unity, it means I have to click through this, build a thing, export to a folder, go through the folders, take the PNGs, separate them out, and then drag the PNGs into Photoshop, move them in Photoshop to build my UI stuff, and then bring that into Unity. Pain in the ass. So, alternative to that, you've got something called the Noun Project. And the Noun Project is another icon provider service. And this one has a really nice Photoshop plugin. And so what you can do here is inside of Photoshop, you can open up a little window, type an icon, pick one you want, click it, and it'll automatically add it as a layer in Photoshop right there. And the way I use the PSD importer in Unity means I can literally drag an icon, click save, and it'll appear in Unity, properly sliced, placed in the right location, added and set up as a UI element, and I can just use it immediately. So it's a small amount of time. It's like 30 seconds or 20 seconds or so, but that's 20 seconds every time I do icon searching. And so this costs 30 a year. I already have access to 31,000 icons, but for the cost of 30 a year, I don't have to spend 30 seconds every time I ever need to do icons anytime throughout the year. And so to me, that's good value. That's like, you sacrifice one night of drinking pizza and you end up with saving yourself quite a bit of time all year in like small amounts of things. So that's what I mean about the cost benefit analysis. Like, I could use a free thing, or at least free now because I paid for it years ago, or I can pay a subscription. And in this case, even though the subscription is providing the same service, it does it faster and easier for me. So that's one of those things you just have to ask yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a big time saver. Wow, that price difference too. The monthly versus yearly, it's 3
Yeah,
times
yeah.
the price on the monthly. Wow, okay. They really want you on the yearly one. That
I
I think
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense, though. That instant feedback and getting things instantly into your workflow makes the biggest difference. It saves you so much time. And you say 30 seconds, but it's 30 seconds times, 1,000 or however many icons or changes to icons you do, right? It's every time you go in and make a change and swap one out.
Quality of life is
Mhm.
super valuable. Super valuable.
Should we jump on to the next asset?
Yeah. The next one I was going to bring up is Dreamteck Splines.
Okay.
That is it's just a good asset. It's just generally, there's a lot of spline assets on the store. They're all pretty good. Dreamteck one is pretty good. Um, it's probably the most user friendly. But I would say the most important thing, it's one of those things you don't need until you need it, right? Until you're actually building some kind of dynamic path or something. But when you do need it, it's like, God, writing your own spline system is a nightmare. Just don't do it. So yeah, it's again, it's very specific. You're not going to use it all the time, but whenever you do use it, it's like you'll be amazed how quickly it just solves the problem you're having.
Right, and it's got in the video a couple examples of problems. What kind of things would you recommend people pop this in for? Like, what's an example of a game or problem that you've seen people just pop in and start to use a spline for?
One of the most common one is tracks. Anytime you've got roads or tracks or fences, anything that's a shape that's surrounding something, and you don't want to have to resolve your spline paths yourself. So it just lets you basically say, this represents one node along the path, build your path, and it'll just make these, there you go, fences like that. It just like
Yeah.
solves that problem for you.
Like
Um,
tracks, fences. I've seen them for
yeah.
3D tracks through space and flying around. Like there you
Yeah.
go. There's the
Runner
airplane
games and
one.
that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like it's
anything
just,
on rails
mhm.
seems to
What
work pretty good.
I was looking at this and thinking of using it to kind of fudge AI movement for especially for NPCs like in a town or something, and figure, okay, these NPCs they can go on this track, right? And then depending on the time of day, maybe, or the weather in the weather system, there's multiple tracks that they might end up going on. And then just say, okay, I know they're always going to be on one of these 5 tracks. And then the logic is really just about which track they choose. So I don't really have to control the anything really. I know that they're not going to get stuck in a corner because I made a error and there was a weird collider that got them, stuck somewhere.
Yeah, you can, and I would say this is just more of a personal preference. The benefit of a spline is smooth cornering. So if you're doing like a flying plane or a bird, splines are amazing. It gives you a lot of power there. If you're doing like a path that's circuitous and whatever, if you're just building like NPCs walking around a village, I'll be honest, you can literally just have an array of vectors. You can just either click in the scene yourself, or hell, really simply just have a bunch of child game objects and draw gizmos. There's more efficient ways to do it, but like if it's just waypoints, you can write 10 lines of code and save yourself the complexities of a system like this.
Mm.
If you're not generating the spline stuff, it kind of feels unnecessary to use the kind of heft of a system like this. But again, if you're doing like a flying section, or you're doing building out dynamic paths, or
Vehicles too, like if they're
vehicles, yeah,
driving and
Yeah.
turning, right? Because people walk straight, but everything else turns.
yeah. But if you're like literally without getting too much into the different ways of doing it, I know Freya Homer had a recent video on this about how you generate splines like this. It's only a few lines of code. If you've got 2 nodes and you want to curve based on a third one, it's a small algorithm. It's like 2-3 lines of code to build a way, instead of going A to B, curve A to B through C. Right? It's not that complicated, and you don't need all of these features. This is
Mm.
actually, I'd almost say it's too powerful for that feature. But yeah, it's an option. I would just say I would use it more for generation of or placement of assets. If it's just AI and it's just walking, literally collection of points, pointed at a point. When it gets to a point, pick another one, does the same thing much later.
So follow-up question then. Now I'm thinking, okay, flying dragon. One of the problems I faced when I was working on bad guys for my game was flying characters, especially dragons. Everyone wants a dragon in their fantasy game. You can't not have a dragon. And I was thinking, well, how am I going to do these these attacks and stuff? Because 3 dimensions much harder than 2 dimensions. Would something like this be usable, or would you suggest another option for I guess local spline use? Like if you want to have a character, it could be a plane or a dragon or something, dive down and come back up and circle back to their origin spot. I could design a spline. I could see myself using this to design that path.
You could, but here's my hacked version of this. You're probably
Oh.
using Cinemachine already, right? Because Cinemachine is just amazing for camera stuff. If you're not, use Cinemachine. Just make sure to use Cinemachine.
Okay.
But put Cinemachine in your project because
Okay.
it'll just, like literally you just need it. It's if you're doing anything with cutscenes, anything with characters looking at stuff, you want to frame a conversation during dialogue, you will want Cinemachine. It will make all of that easy. Once you are using Cinemachine, there's a camera feature in there called the dolly track. And the dolly track is just a really basic spline. Like it doesn't give you all of this stuff. It doesn't do the generation stuff, but it lets you draw in editor a nice path of a spline. You can put an object on it, you can parent it to the spline, and you can then just move it along. That'll give you all that you need for that kind of description. And it's inbuilt in with the rest of the systems.
Okay.
So
I
I
think
would say
Andrew might be talking about doing like a dragon attack though, right? Like where the dragon's sitting there floating and then he's got like a curve for like it flies back around and then swoops down or something like that, right? Where it's
Something
all
like that,
relative
yeah.
to its local position and you could be anywhere in the world. Like you find this dragon and he does attacks. And I think in that scenario, it could definitely work. You just need to verify that the path along that spline is still valid with all your collisions and stuff, right? You don't want to do some checks when you're picking which path or which attack to do. Check across them that if you move the dragon along that whole spline, that it's still valid the whole way across and that he gets to the point. But I think that could work in that scenario for like figuring out like or like a dive bomb attack, like the curve that it takes and then the way that it loops up and spins off or whatever.
Well,
I
that's
think you
what
could definitely do that.
That's exactly it, the dive bomb and stuff, because if you imagine like a scene with a lot of trees, you're not going to get attacked dive bomb from a dragon with trees, right? So you go out into the field though, now this dragon or whatever can dive bomb you. So perhaps that's where like there's some predetermined areas that you can get attacked. I think Skyrim does this with their dragons where there's only a certain number of things the dragons can do. And they just loop between these different sections where they'll land and attack. But they won't go they're not random, right? They're preset. But yeah, okay. These are good advice though. And I think Polarith AI, somebody mentioned that in the chat too. So another option to check out.
Yeah, I think this would work though. Something like this for figuring out that path.
It can. It's like it's nothing wrong with using this. I just don't think like you'd need to for small cases. But it is worth playing with. I mean, again, if you picked up the bundle, which of course you did, it's well worth the money. You have it, play with it, see what you like. I think this could work for what you're doing. It's just if someone's saying, "Ooh, I need to just make a thing move along a path," there are simpler solutions. But like obviously, if you have it already, go nuts, right?
And it's also cool for like your passive dragon and flying other thing paths because you can have them doing turns and curves and doing interesting things and not just going point to point flying around, right? You can definitely make it more interesting without really much work at all.
Especially I can imagine like if you want something flying around a tower, maybe you just do a simple movement to get them to a point, and once they're at that point, they can say, oh, do this action, this spline. They follow that spline. When they get back to that point, they choose a different one. So
go land on top of the tower and pick a new move, or
or
just have some joint point at the top where they can switch between the different splines.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sounds cool. Yeah, it's a neat one. I hadn't even considered splines as like a key one, but it is a pretty useful thing to have as soon as you have one of those problems. It also could be one of those cases, like you mentioned, though, where you have the tool, so then you start to focus your game around like, well, we can put this in, so now the game is this. You gotta watch out for that part.
I would say, as a basic though, like one of the easiest kinds of games to test if you're doing like my first game is an infinite runner. And an infinite runner has a couple of simple problems to solve. They're not, I wouldn't say simple. I mean, if you've never done them before, learning how to pool things, how to kind of reset your positions and cameras and things, learning how to generate terrain, generate meshes, a lot of that stuff can be frustrating at first, but it's pretty simple once you've done it once. And having a tool like this basically means you can build infinite tracks and paths and AI very, very quickly. If you want like an infinite flying game, you're like 70% there if you use something like this. So it's a really cool thing to play with, at least as a way to prototype ideas.
So what's the last one? We had 5 that you wanted to recommend, right?
Yeah, well, first I want to give one caution, and I'd love to see if someone can correct me on this, but I would say one of them here is Editor Console Pro.
Oh.
I really want to like this one, and I really like what it looks like. I think it's a nice, it adds a lot of features the current console doesn't have, but it just slows Unity down. And I really wish it didn't, because every time I've used it, it starts to frustrate me because everyone knows you change some code, you go back to Unity and it does that little compile step that's infuriatingly slow. This kind of hides the console for a second with a pop-up and takes a bit longer because of the way it works. And even if it's only adding like an extra, second or two to that process, it adds enough that I just got really frustrated with it and uninstalled it. So I would say if it's a small project, Editor Console Pro is actually really valuable. But I just it drove me insane at some stage. I had to get rid of it.
Yeah, I actually ran into a similar problem with it with a very large project where it was causing a lot of issues, and it wasn't my decision, but the decision was made to just rip it out because it had some cool benefits, but was causing a lot of problems and way more than a second in some of those scenarios. So it's interesting. I guess I haven't tried using it again lately, mostly just because I don't even remember the cool stuff that was in there anymore. Or it used to do a lot of things that like I couldn't do, and it would add features, but then I think a lot of those kind of got added in. But I'm kind of curious. I think it does work on devices, though, right? Didn't it let you do things on mobile devices too, or something?
I think so.
Or
I
did
think it
it
had a
have
remote
Xlog? I
view.
can't remember.
Well, these days, like I tend to just do my own. Like, let's be honest. Like, you can subscribe to the events Unity fires for the event system, and you can just make your own console. And so I've found writing 10 lines of code to show something on a Text Mesh Pro or something, maybe not super performant and has issues, but it's really quick. Lets me place it anywhere in the scene I want if I'm doing a VR project or something. Does what I need. I don't tend to need external solutions. Yeah, as for the last one is just Mobile Tools Plus. Now, I say this because not specifically this one, because again, there's like 5 or 6 mobile thing plugins. It doesn't really matter. My point is, though, if you're doing anything cross-platform or anything on mobile devices, just pick one of these. It doesn't really matter which one. And if you're getting this one, cool, it's as good as all the others. All it does is it wraps the APIs. It can be really, really tedious if you're building for iOS and Android and you have to like display mobile ads or show a leaderboard or do any of the like toast pop-ups or something, because there's subtly different API changes per platform, per thing, how they manage it. And like, I'll be honest, architecture is a complicated subject, and a lot of people don't know how to decouple that portion of their code and end up writing very particular, if on Android do this, if on iOS do this. And if you use any of the mobile platforms, it just does it for you most of the time. It depends which one you're using and what its features are. But as a general rule, it lets you say, show a pop-up, show an ad, and it'll figure out the rest for you. So if you're doing anything mobile and you want leaderboards and, various notifications, just pick one of the integration things.
In-app purchases.
Yeah. All of them are around $30 to $50, and I swear it'll cost you more of your soul, time, and effort and everything trying to solve even one or two of these problems by hand than just using any one of them. And like local access too. Here's another thing: access to the local gallery, access to the local file system, saving files, loading images, accessing the camera. There's so many like device related stuff you just don't want to do yourself.
Couldn't agree more. I've tried them doing them myself in the past, back before there were assets, right when they started coming out and going through that process. And it's you can do it, and I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's just an API, I can do it, I know how to do it, and there's no doubt that you can.
I
It's
did. That's what I
just
said.
not
I was
worth the
like,
time.
it's just an API. I'll just do it myself. I'll just like make some web calls. No, it's such a pain in the ass. It's not worth
There's
it.
so much, yeah, and then you've got to do it differently for the different devices that all handle things differently with totally different models, and you've got to wrap that into something that makes sense that you can use in one way, so that you're not using it differently from each one. It's I would never recommend building a mobile game without one of these tools, some tool to interact with the devices that you're using, or some asset there. It's just it's so not it's not your job to make those things. These are just like layers on top of the API to make it simple. Don't waste your time. Yeah. Unless you've got a really, really solid reason, which I struggle to come up with. Yeah, use something like this. And that's really cheap. I remember paying like $70 per feature. Like when we first started doing
Yeah,
these
some of these
things, it
used to
was
sell
like
them separately, and then yeah, you
leaderboard,
Yep.
pay for each
70
one. Yeah,
bucks.
yeah.
IAPs for iOS, $70. Oh, you
Is
want those
that
for Android? That's another $70.
that Prime 31?
Yep, yep.
Yep. That's I
It
did
it
those
was
too.
worth it though. I mean, it was worth it at that price. Here at the included in the bundle, it's just
Yeah.
insane not to take it.
Yeah. I mean, this is like, you know, all of us are using Unity, or most of us are not building our own engine, I should say, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of like that, you know. You want something that if it just works and it doesn't take any time, sounds like there's how much, yeah, it's just worth a lot, you know, because it just works.
Yeah, you get all the functionality, get the ads, and it looks like it's got a complete game example, huh? That seems pretty cool. So, Andrew, were
Yeah.
there any that you wanted to recommend?
So I actually haven't used tons of these, except I would say that my big thing, besides, you know, these tools, which are great, RPG Builder, people keep talking about. I've not used it myself. I know the developer has a special section on my Discord, and I know a lot of my customers do use RPG Builder and the other ones as well. So uMMORPG as well. But RPG Builder is the newer one. I think it's been around for a year-ish now, and looks great. A lot of people have been liking. So I would, you know, for $175, I mean, that's the MSRP there. That's a lot of money for 25 bucks. That's probably worth it for a lot of people who want that kind of complete kit. But aside from that, I would say the things like the icon pack, the GUI Pro Kit, the Fantasy Sounds bundle, the Fantasy Ambient Sound pack, those are things that, again, for $25, you're going to subscribe to these various subscription sites that have audio and stuff. All right, now you can just grab, I don't even know how many clips they have, 420 or 3,500 clips for a Fantasy Sounds bundle, and 20 minutes of ambient loops from the ambient sound pack. So it's like, all right, whether you use them in production or not, you can decide that later. But if you're just trying to make a quick game and you need to make it feel better, just throw in one of these loops. It's the $1 tier, so it can cost you $1 if you want. But these are the things that I think are wonderful to have just on hand, so you don't have to worry about it when the time comes that you need whatever sound or whatever quick icon. Even if the cartoonish GUI style is not your style, one day you're probably going to be like, oh shoot, I need whatever, and it's nice just to have it there ready to go, so you don't have to go searching for it and then pull out your wallet at that point and all that.
These look really good. I kind of skipped over a lot of the art and sound ones when I initially looked, so didn't even
Yeah.
notice them. But I really like that RPG builder one. Looks really, really cool. I don't know if people have seen this, but it seems like it's basically an RPG, or at least the core of an RPG, right? All built
Yeah.
up and set up for you to play and customize.
Yeah, and it looks like, I mean, they came out with the beta, I think, a year ago or almost a year ago. I don't know if it's officially still in beta or not, but it's, you know, got a ton of features, and it's I would say it's probably opinion. I haven't used it, so maybe people in the chat can tell me if I'm wrong here, but it looks very opinionated. Like you need
Yeah.
to do it this way. So if you want, I don't know how expandable it is. If you want to, change something and have it act a different way, if you want a different inventory system, can you do that? I don't know. But
Well, you
if you
probably have to
just,
code it, is my guess. But
yeah, it might be difficult to code though. I don't know how, like some of these might be very structured and rigid. So I don't know, but if you like what you see here and you're like, oh, that's the kind of game I want to make, and I'm fine with that menu system, I'm fine with that, controller system, then yeah, it seems like a complete game for you to just drag in your own story, make your own story. So
yeah, this one looks really, really cool. I mean, it looks definitely worth at 175. So I could see
yeah,
it at 25 bucks. Like I mean, I'm planning on grabbing this bundle. I was gonna get it right after our call. I was thinking about just buying it on the call, but I think I'll grab it after the call and then going through. And I definitely want to play with this one because it looks like a lot of fun. And it
yeah,
looks like you basically have a game. He's got a pet right here. 4 out of 11 pets. What? So there's a whole system in there for. Yeah,
yeah.
it
All
seems
these
cool.
RPG systems, they just add in, and it's like, okay, if you want this, do it. And it's kind of, in many ways, it reminds me of Game Creator, where Game Creator has systems that you pay for each system add-on. So Game Creator, you buy the base, and then there's the melee add-on, there's the inventory add-on, there's a stats add-on. But I think Game Creator may be more flexible, where they're not specific to RPGs, where this one is straight up, you're making an RPG, let me help you build it.
Yeah. But here you've also got the code. So like you've got you got the RPG, but you also have all of the source code there, so you can go back in and modify and extend this out, assuming that you feel comfortable with that. Who knows how the code is, but
Yeah,
based on the reviews being all 5 stars, my guess is that they're pretty good. Wow,
yeah.
I don't know.
I've
This is
heard
really
I've heard
exciting.
good things from it, from people who use my art. So
Nice. They got a bunch of different stats in there. Yeah, this looks very, very cool and very interesting. I have to dive into it. Take a peek at what they built there. Cool. Well, and then uMMORPG. I think that's an interesting one for a lot of
same
people too.
thing.
Like,
Yeah, it's been around a lot longer. And this is it's officially the remastered one, I think. If you click into it, it's the remastered one, which is the new version.
oh, okay. This is the new one where they've kind of redeveloped and re-architected the system to be more extensible, from what I understand, right?
Something like that. Yeah, it comes with minor improvements and somewhere I think the other day I looked at this. Oh yeah, so a component-based architecture and character controller movement is the two big things that they added, and then a few smaller things as well. So it's got networking, so MMORPG. So networking, it's extensible, all that stuff. So
And
a
that'd be
lot of
the difference
features.
between that and the RPG Builder one, right? Which would be a single player RPG, and this would be for people wanting to build like an MMO.
Yeah, I don't
Or
know. Maybe people who use RPG builders that do MMO stuff as well. I don't actually know off the top of my head.
I assumed it was a single player
Single
game
player.
because I didn't see any
True.
mention, or I assumed if it was multiplayer that would have been like splashed all over the thing. So
Very
I could have
true.
just
Very
missed it
true.
though. I am sometimes blind to that stuff. So, cool. Well, yeah, I think this bundle overall just seems nuts. So
I mean,
it,
$25. Come on.
yeah,
It's
I don't know if I've seen a bundle that was as good of a deal. So I'm pretty excited about it. Um, so I'll get rid of that thing and make us big heads again.
we've always had big heads.
Yeah.
Just make them all explode.
Yeah.
So are there any questions going on in chat or other things you guys wanted to kind of dive into?
I did notice some questions we sort of skipped over while we were going through that, so it might be worth having it scrub through. Or if anybody has any, repeat your question now, and we can get to it.
Someone asked to accept a LinkedIn request. Check that out. I was talking about that earlier, how LinkedIn is usually the majority of stuff you get on there is just recruiters spamming you, so you pretty much ignore it. Like that, at least for me, that's what I get.
Here's a little tip for LinkedIn, by the way. This is one of my favorite little tricks. I forgot where I read it, but it's so good. In your name on your LinkedIn profile, put a symbol of some kind. Could be an @ symbol. I have a diamond little thing. Put any symbol you want in the name field. And then anytime you get an email, if they're using an auto generator, a lot of companies are, it'll say, hello, @ symbol Jason. And you're like, you can ignore it because it's not for you. It's an automated email. So now I know when a message or a DM gets sent to me, and it's whether it's sent by a person, because the same person isn't going to include the arbitrary symbols when they write the message to you. So it's a really quick way to filter out all of those nonsense emails.
Yeah, usually I just click on them and it's super obvious. It says, "Hi, Jason. I'm a technical recruiter for some company in some other country working on a technology you've never touched. Are you interested? I think you'd be a perfect fit. Would you like to come work here?" Like, what? I'd say that's about 75% of the ones that I get on there. And then occasionally I get a real message and I miss it. So then I don't invite people.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, somebody said that you forgot to tell people where you get soundtracks, Jason. Is this true?
Oh, yeah. So it really depends what you're doing them for. In my case, if you're just buying sounds, if it's for a YouTube video, for example, there's a ton of different resources. My personal favorite's Epidemic Sound. They're just the best all round one, I think. But honestly, there's like 10 different providers. I've tried a few of them. I like theirs because they have a really good sound effects library, better than most other ones. I've used the ones like what's the one called? There's another one that I have as well. I can't even remember the name of it.
I use artlist.io for that purpose.
Yeah, I haven't used that one. I've heard good things. The problem I have is a lot of them skew corporate. So what I would recommend is when you're trying to pick one of these sound libraries, demo it first, because a lot of them have this like upbeat ukulele nonsense as 80% of their library. Some of them have, like, there's another one as well whose name I can't remember right now, who have actual licensed artists. They're genuinely good songs, but you're paying more for the privilege. And then also you're paying different licenses per use case. Some of them will only let you use the songs in YouTube videos or something. You can't put them in a project that you're selling. So be very careful. Pick one that works for what you need. In my case, Epidemic Sound for client videos and YouTube videos and that kind of stuff. But for games and things, the truth is, I'll just use whatever crap I find on the asset store to start. And then I would probably hire someone. I think music is one of those things that honestly, people remember your game for the soundtrack. So if you're willing to, if you're going to spend 3 years of your life building a game, spend a few thousand and pay for your own custom 13, 14 track soundtrack. It'll cost you 3 to 10,000. It's like it's not cheap. It really isn't.
It's not cheap.
But it's like it's about, like, think about all the games in your life. How many of the soundtracks are like the touchstone? How many games do you play? Like, I don't know about everyone else, but I play soundtracks on loop. Like, I have video game soundtracks. I have sections of them, and if there's ever bundles that offers the soundtrack, I will get that too if I like the game. So I wouldn't just pick arbitrary non-memorable soundtracks if you're building a game. If you only need a couple, fine. You can actually pay. You can pay between 200 and 900 usually for a single song, depending on how experienced the artist is. And you can just get 2 or 3. Have your theme tune, have a couple of leitmotifs for various different characters. That'll get you by, and you can just have like generic battle music and stuff for the rest. But do have some unique music. Like, you need something that's yours in your project. If that's too much for you, go to something like Audio Jungle and just buy those. And you can buy outright royalty-free songs in Audio Jungle for between 20 and 40 for a song. And they're fine, but again, they'll be used in lots of corporate projects. If you really don't care, if you just want sounds, Incompetech will do. Just go to Incompetech. Everyone knows Incompetech. You've heard half the songs already. They're in every YouTube video you've ever watched, but they're free or cheap, and all you need is to actually reference them in your project. They're attribution licenses. So as long as you just mention where you got them, you're free to use them in most cases. So depends on your goals. But again, if you're making a game you intend to sell, put a bit of money behind it. Like, you're already investing yourself, your time, your life. and it's worth putting your best foot forward.
I've got a big tip for music, actually, where you can get music that's cheap, made for games, and not anybody uses it. It's called the Unity Asset Store. Because I have music on the Unity Asset Store and no one buys it. And it's music that you can customize it. The tracks are all on different layers, so you can create your own mixes, and you can get lots of different sounds out of it. You can do, live mixing depending on whether you're fighting or whether you're hurt or whatever in the game. But nobody buys music from the Asset Store, it seems, because I don't get any sales. I'll give you a link in here, and yeah, but honestly, like, with the idea of like everybody having the same stuff, I would say get it from the Asset Store, because nobody buys it from the Asset Store. It's made for games, and then use it. And then when you get funded, when you've got money coming in, start replacing it with your custom stuff, because it is very expensive to make music.
I just pasted that in the chat, and it looks like it's these 3 packs right here, huh?
There you go. And I mean, a lot of the earlier characters have these tracks in them. So if you buy the character pack, you'll get these music tracks. These are the standalone ones. But I stopped producing music because the guy who did all these music, and it was all custom done by this Nathan Clearly, in this wonderful composer. He got a lot of other projects from after doing these, and suddenly he's much more expensive because he deserves it, and I can't afford it anymore. So, especially since nobody was buying these, and while people said, yes, it's great to have the music, and I like that it has music, I never got feedback that people were like, no, the music is what makes this an amazing package. It wasn't a value add as it is for me. It wasn't for other people as much as I would have liked to think. But still, there's like 30 or 40 tracks in the whole library. So, and they're all customizable. So you can create all sorts of different mixes and get different sounds out of them, and to the point where some of them don't even sound like the same song once you remix it.
And that actually brings up a good point. How do you actually use these in a useful way? So just a kind of tangent to the previous topic. If you are a professional, if you're making a game that you're going to sell at a professional level, and you actually you have the resources to put into it, I'd say if you're not an audio person, don't even really bother doing it yourself. There are companies like Power Up Studios or Power Up Audio. They will do your audio for you. Now, they're not cheap, but they're an entire company who do really good audio for games, and they'll do it for you, and they'll do a really good job. Again, I don't know them. I don't work with them. I know the work they've done, and I'm very impressed with it. As for how they do it and how you can do what they do cheap for yourself, is they use FMOD. And so if you haven't used FMOD, Unity actually uses FMOD. A lot of people don't realize this. Unity's actual audio engine behind the scenes is FMOD. You're just not using all of its features. But you can directly use it yourself. So you can use the native FMOD integration. You can use Wise, which is kind of the more expensive enterprise solution you probably see in kind of large Unreal games, or you can use FMOD. And I think FMOD is the best bang for your buck version of this. FMOD is similar licenses to Unity. In other words, it's cheap if you're a small game. You then pay more if it's bigger. You can look at the pricing. But what FMOD lets you do is you take all of the audio out of Unity. So you just don't put your audio in Unity at all. You, in fact, turn off the audio engine. You just don't use Unity audio. You don't have to, but you probably should. Save yourself the performance. And then what you do is FMOD runs in parallel to Unity and does all of the processing separately. An immediate benefit you get from this, it's such a small thing, is because it's not tied to Unity scenes and objects, you can play music across scene transitions with no hiccups, no hitches, no issues. That alone makes your game feel so much more professional rather than just cutting instantly when you cut between scenes. But the real benefit is you can start sending variables to FMOD. So the way it works is you come up with values in your game. You say player health between 0 and 1, percentage of how much health they have, radius to enemies, how close or far away from enemies they are, how close to water you are, whether you're in a cave, how deep into the cave you are, whether it's raining or not, whatever nonsense variables you want, you send those numbers into FMOD, and then FMOD has an event system. And you can trigger events like in combat, out of combat, in village, out of village, whatever else, and you combine the two. So now a sound designer completely outside the game can say, if you're in a cave and it's raining and it's in combat, play this track. But if the combat ends, have this part of the looping audio fade out and start playing this track instead. And then if the rain lets up, add this instrument. If you're suddenly low on health, muddy it with these VST filters or whatever. And so your sound designer can completely design the sound for your game outside of Unity, entirely in a variable based structure. And you can do this yourself. Like, it's not, I'm making it sound like it is a skill. It requires a lot of work. It's not easy to do at first. But with a basic, if you've used Audition, or if you use any other, even Audacity to some degree, you can figure it out. Like, it's not end of the world. But like, if you want a dynamic system where one thing that I really love doing is having two versions of a track which are mixed with different instruments. And then as you cross a boundary of some kind, it plays the same song at the same location, but then switches instruments. When I first heard that from Grant Kirchhoff in Banjo-Kazooie, blew my mind. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen in a video game. And so the way I would do audio in any large project is just 100% FMOD. It's too powerful not to use. And like all of the stuff that you'd possibly want from that, like having reactive hits when you hit something and has the sound effects, like if you get hit like Zelda does, where your audio goes all kind of staticky a bit when you're hit in certain cases, or if you want the audio to match certain hits, there's so much you can do. And also one of the other things that's really powerful, very subtle, but people don't realize games do this, is tracks often have sections, right? So you have like the nice dramatic entering the field area, and then you've got this loop, and then at the end it fades out. And what often happens is people will play the whole track, the track ends, you go back to the start, and it redoes the fade up, redoes the bit, redoes the fade out, and back out again. What you actually want to do is play the fade in when you enter an area, loop this section, and keep going like this, back and forth. And then only when you exit the area do you let it run through to the end and then play the next track. So what you can do as well is set loop points, and the track will actually like stay in the largest part of the soundtrack where it's dramatic until the fight ends. Or if a fight has multiple phases, you could have like phases actually tied to the song. So the song actually ramps over the course of the fight, and then it doesn't just cut to the end. It will turn off that like loop, and it'll play from the loop through to the end and fade out. So there's all of these really subtle things that you don't realize are massive changes to how a player perceives a space that you can do really easily, like surprisingly easy using FMOD. Oh, and having gotten into features like spatialization, it supports the whole spatialization stuff. So you have the same thing as an audio listener in Unity. There's an area, an audio range. It'll automatically do all of the positional audio relative to it because it's external. And oh god, so many more features that I can't even think of offhand. Either way, it's like I'm surprised more people don't just intuitively go straight for using that for Unity.
Yeah, I think maybe it does this, but beat control too is an interesting concept where if you know your enemy's attacks are a certain length of time, you could actually time their attacks slightly differently so that the attacks always land on the beat, and so it just players might not even notice it, but suddenly you've got this movement that matches the music as well, and not only the movement but the feeling in your hand when the controller rumbles or the screen shakes all matches the music, and you wouldn't even necessarily realize it. And I think one of the things that go ahead.
No, so the way this works, this is actually interesting. The way you do this with something like FMOD is kind of weirdly different. If you're doing it the way you're describing, you actually don't have the game actions match the audio. You have the audio match the game actions. So on hit, you would fire an event into the audio system, and then the sound designer can like add the hits in the track dynamically relative to the events that you fire. So the drum beats will hit as you hit, right? It literally like adds the drum beats to the track. But what you're describing, kind of the more approach where it makes more sense for rhythm-based games, it unfortunately doesn't do that. But what it does do, which is a bit hard, you have to actually code this yourself. So it's an external tool. It's running in parallel, like with your game. And if you're willing to write your own code for it, we're getting to weird territory here. You can actually write your own interop functions to reference the other running application, to grab the list of markers, and then for the markers, you can effectively generate objects in your game. So this isn't native, it's not what it's built for, but there are ways around it. If you want to learn more about this, there's a YouTube channel, Scott Game Sounds, and he goes into really detailed stuff on how to do this. But it's really fascinating. You can actually do a Guitar Hero type thing using FMOD, but the trade-off is you're going to have to manually do the markers externally in FMOD. It's extra work. I wouldn't really recommend going that route. If you want rhythm-based stuff in your game, there's a really great plugin, one of my favorites on the asset store, called Choreographer. It's not as feature-filled as FMOD. Now they integrate with FMOD now. I think they didn't used to in the past. I think they now do. I can't remember. Either way, if it's rhythm-based stuff, I use Choreographer. If it's like a game scale audio, I'd use FMOD.
Nice.
So there's a big question on the implementation part of this. So if somebody wants to get into it, you've convinced them to use FMOD. First off, there's a request that you just make a tutorial on it. But how hard is that integration overall? Like, is it something that people? Where would you recommend people get started with it, and how long before you have it up and running, or is it going to be?
Well, I'll put it this way. There's a guy I know who's making his first game. He's never worked with Unity before. He's not a particularly strong coder. He's kind of getting into it as we speak. He was equally convinced by my suggestions to use FMOD, and he set it up in a couple hours. He's never done it before. He'd never seen it. He installed the app. He went through some online tutorials, and he got it working. Like it's very easy to do. If you want a more in-depth solution to how to do all the like dynamic audio stuff, this course is great. I've watched it myself. But yeah, I would say it's worth a look.
So overall, though, to get started for somebody who's already got some audio in their game, is it relatively quick? They can just kind of drop it in.
Yeah. So
things in and out.
You effectively all you do is you install FMOD as a separate app. You create an FMOD project. You then open Unity and add the Unity FMOD integration. You link to where the other project is, and you're done. FMOD will do all the magic for you. And then all you do is, and there's a single attribute you put on top of a string. So string event, FMOD event, it'll automatically show you all of the sound effects and all of the music in your FMOD project in Unity Editor. You pick the one you want, it'll fire the event automatically, and FMOD does it all for you. There's a lot of programming you can do to automate or do different things, but at a base level, if you have no idea what you're doing, you can set it up in an hour, and it's no different than adding any other asset. You add an asset, you paste in a URL, and then it just works. It just integrates naturally with the way Unity works.
Nice.
In fact, actually, I would say it's arguably easier because you're not dealing with audio sources and audio clips and dragging audio clips around. You just take all of your audio out of Unity and you just say, play main theme here, hit here, footstep sound here, and you don't think about the implication details. You just send it all off. As for running on a separate thread, yes, it runs on a separate thread. And not only does it run in a separate thread, it's got its own pooling manager. And you can do some really clever stuff where per sound effect, you can solve how it pools. So for example, you could have footstep sounds, which it'll pool and it'll destroy the oldest ones and keep the newest ones. Or if you've got like enemy feet that are running towards you, you can actively have it kill the furthest away from the player source. So as new enemies come in, you can have a max cap on 10 simultaneous voices for footstep sounds. And if you're swarmed by 50 enemies, it'll only play 10, but it'll play the 10 nearest spatially localized. Like you can get really specific if that's what you want to do. It's objectively like way more powerful than the Unity default audio. You know, having separate middleware is always going to be more powerful.
Yeah, it seems really good. There was somebody had mentioned up above. I lost the comment though about the Cinti sale too, and I thought that was worth mentioning because it's only going on for a few more, and they've got everything half off as well. So if you like the low poly assets, there's something specific that hasn't been on sale lately. Seems like a good time to go grab those.
And there's also 3 free stuff at the asset store too.
Oh, there's free ones on the asset store?
Yeah. It looks like they're rolling their own sale, but they have a publisher sale on the asset store right now.
Oh, and it's playing audio for me. Paste that again.
Yeah, I had to leave that. Every time I link to that page, it starts playing a stream. It's really annoying. I have to,
The audio plays too?
Yeah, it auto plays a stream for me.
Oh, it doesn't. It auto plays, but it doesn't play the audio for me.
No, it does. It's playing audio. I can hear it. Is that me or you?
It must be you because I have mine turned off.
I paused it and it's still playing.
2 windows maybe?
No, it's playing the background.
I think it's probably just got 2 streams down there.
It's got 2 streams at the same video, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Reloading it fixed it, got rid of it. But yeah, the inbound the Twitch stream drives me nuts.
That's interesting.
I get that all the time. I'm like, wait, what happened? Just because the audio. If it was silence, it wouldn't be a problem, but it does come in unmuted for me every time.
That's weird. For me, it doesn't, but...
I wonder if it might be like my pop-up blocker or something doing some weird crap to it.
For Raphael's question there about if Pro Builder works at runtime, it can. It doesn't natively. Out of the box, it's meant as an editor tool. I can't remember where it is linked, but if there's a guide, they will tell you how to make it work at runtime. Like you can actually use it, but you have to like drag in extra DLLs and reference stuff. It's not super easy, but it's doable.
Nice. Here, I wanted to pop up that the thing you had mentioned too. Oh, oops, I got it on the wrong page. Let's pop this over here. The free assets, the free Cinti assets. So if you go to the page, I just linked it in the chat there too. It looks like they've got 3 free gifts: a prototype pack, the city pack, and the icon pack available. Nice.
Yeah, you have to use a coupon code, but add them to your cart, use the coupon code, and they're free.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is right there. Cinti 2021. Nice. Yeah, everybody should go grab that. Go grab some free assets. I didn't even realize those were there. And I'd seen the Cinti store sale, but I didn't realize that they had the other.
I went to add them, and turns out I already owned all 3 of them.
Well, no, you didn't own the icons one. That one's brand new. That just came out.
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe that was added. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I know I had the prototype one. I don't think I had the others.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks cool. Polygon style icons. Very neat. Yeah, I'm gonna grab that one. Let's add to cart. All right, I'll check out afterwards. You guys don't have to watch me. Well, that's a cool one. That's a nice deal to know about. Any other crazy deals I should know about before they end? No other crazy deals.
No, not that I know of.
Lots of free dragons out there.
Probably there's a free dragon here and there.
All right, so there was a question. Jason, in your course, do you explain just the basics of programming, or explain the basic, medium, and hard? And do you explain just Unity Engine or just how to program? Yes. So all except for removing the word just. So go over the basics a lot, some of the medium stuff, and try to get as much into the hard and more complicated stuff. Always in the context of Unity, but primarily focused on the programming side. Everything, the majority of what I try to focus on in my course stuff, and even in the YouTube videos, you see 85% of the YouTube videos are just about the programming side, and try to touch a little bit on the other things, but I feel like other people are much better at the design, making things look better, making things fun and more interesting as actual games. And I just like to focus on the code side of it and how to get the systems all working and up and running. There's a question about dungeon versus dungeon architect. Oh, dungeon versus dungeon architect.
It's a dungeon.
Those are the 2 different dungeon generation tools that are out there, right? And oh man, I know Chris recently or semi-recently had gone through both of these, right? Do you remember which one he was ended up?
I don't remember which one he settled on. I know I've used Dungeon years ago. Like that has been around a very long time. I've not used Dungeon Architect though, so I don't know.
Yeah, I remember trying them both, and I remember one of them being quite a bit easier to use. But again, this is many, many years ago, and Chris had gone through and done the same, and I remember he had the same result, but I don't remember which one it was anymore. If anybody in chat knows, I'd be curious to know what you guys recommend on that. What about you, Andrew? Have you used either one of those, Dungeon or Dungeon Architect?
I have not. I have not. No, that's another thing that I think there was another one that recently came up that's like was a maybe a Kickstarter actually that works in Unity. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I have not, but they're always very interesting. The idea of you know, procedural generation or just easier level design really. I haven't used any of them now.
So it looks like he uses Dungeon Architect. That's the comment we got there. And from what I remember, and what a lot of people tend to do, is he was generating his levels and then using those as a base point to actually create the levels. So instead of trying to do like totally dynamic runtime level generation or completely just randomized level generation, using those as kind of the starting point and then going in and customizing them. So you got like a cool level, hit the button a bunch of times until it looks close, and then go in and make it actually interesting, which I think is an important step that a lot of people miss. I think people try to just take a randomly generated level or a randomly generated set of levels and make that their game and don't realize how
Yeah.
hard it is to make that fun.
Yeah, but please don't just use auto-generated stuff, especially like runtime generated things. Like your game will not be fun if everything is constantly auto-generated. Because think about it as, I think what a lot of people miss is when you play a game, you're building a story. You as a player are playing an adventure. There is I am character X, I enter dungeon Y for MacGuffin Z, right? There is whether or not you expressly say it, you are building a narrative. The player is an agent in a story. And if the story has no narrator or no writer, it's just going to be meandering. And imagine how unsatisfying it is that the story of your game doesn't have a 3-act structure. Like it's just going to be a mess. So you really want to make sure your game has peaks and valleys. You want to structure. If there's one thing that's important about your game more than anything else, it's to picture the journey of your character emotionally as like a line. Like imagine your player playing the game. You want, highs, a lot of high energy stuff, and then drop, and then give them some time to rest, and then more peaks and high energy. And you want to understand and control that flow for a player. And the more stuff you dynamically generate, the harder that's going to be to do. So generating it at editor time is fine, saves you a lot of work. But once you've done that, go through and make sure that the levels actually make sense and start placing your objects in the room so that it has a nice flow. You don't have to not use generating tools, but you use them to save time, not to save understanding. Like you can't cheat your way out of game design. You can cheat your way out of
design
time.
levels. They're automatic, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to do level design. Yeah, I've seen it as just like a replacement for writing content. Like, oh, we'll skimp out on the content or make the content easier and faster by making it automatic. And it always, it just ends up being terrible. Like it's just not good content, right? You can make an unlimited amount of it, but nobody cares about the amount of content. People care about the quality of content. Nobody plays a game because it's got unlimited levels, right?
Like
It's not a
if you
selling
want
point anybody cares about.
if you want the perfect example, I've seen so many articles about people talking in the comments of Subnautica, saying that it is the best example of procedural generated gameplay they've ever seen, because it constantly feels organic and they have a journey and whatever. And that's because it's not procedurally generated. That's the secret. Everything in Subnautica was placed, which is kind of horrifying to think. But there's a reason why, no matter how you play that game, it always feels like you pace the story where you start to feel lost at first. You have a slightly safe-ish environment with a few dangers nearby. You start to get more of a evolving story. You start to feel safer about the environment. You start taking bigger risks. You start learning more about the story. Things start to evolve. So even in a game where you're organically traveling in different directions, picking up stuff, the game has a flow to it where you feel mastery as you play. And that is not an accident. That game was structured where the resources are located in places to give you a journey of a story. And people really don't appreciate that. It's not just a giant underwater thing that you swim around and do stuff. There is a structured narrative of if you did a heat map of how players travel that area, they actively incentivize you to certain areas, disincentivize you from others until certain resources are met, and then you can visit other areas that you actually like. You will travel it in a roughly similar kind of flow to other players, and that's the reason why that game feels very good. It's one of my favorite exploration games ever.
Well, we had a super chat come in. Thank you, Nicholas. And it was a question about what the biggest mistake you think young game developers make today is.
I'm thinking that they're going to make tons of money off of Roblox.
So is that something that people think?
I've been recently seen a good number of YouTube videos and articles too about Roblox and how a lot of young, essentially game developers, are spending money in order to make games on Roblox, thinking that they're gonna make money back. But the model that Roblox has is like they get 20% of the cut, and it's hard to even take your money out. And that a lot of these younger kids, and I'm talking about like 12 to 15-year-olds, are thinking, oh, I'm going to be a game developer, and they want to make games, but they go to Roblox to make games, and they don't come to an engine or something else.
Interesting. I guess I don't know
even,
anybody who does a lot of Roblox stuff personally, so it's not something
I'd even say not just think they're going to make lots of money in Roblox and just think they're going to make lots of money in general. Like, I'm not going to lie. You don't get into games to make money. That's just, I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. That you can make money making games, but if you want to make money, there are better ways. If you're a programmer, there are ways for you to make money quicker, faster.
I would say there are easier ways to make money. I wouldn't say they're necessarily better ways, because you can do if you like the actual job of the game, at least on the programming side. I won't talk too much about the other disciplines.
Sure.
But on the programming side, if you enjoy games and you enjoy game development, and depending on the scenario, situation, and obviously region and everything else, you can definitely make just as good of money, or very good money, doing game dev stuff. But
I would say the point
you'll make more money as a hedge fund running a hedge fund than any of these things. Like, it's all relative, right?
True. What I mean is, like, the reason you go into games is because you're favoring enjoying your work, where money's a secondary. My point is, if your goal is to make money, games is not if you're choosing a path and my objective is to maximize my finances, you're not going into games, right?
We shouldn't go into programming either, right? You should go into finance.
Well, yeah, sure. I definitely agree with that. I guess my point is that I think a lot of people, when they start learning to make games, they start going, when will this make me money? And it's like, well, hang on a second. You've got a long journey of learning to make it, getting better at it, getting small wins, building an audience, lots of like there are ways you can short circuit that. But again, I wouldn't make that. I wouldn't use that as your milestone marker for success. A lot of people don't think they're successful as a game dev until they're making a salary doing it. That's not the point of that process, right? That process is you're trying to learn how to make games there. And that's why my personal suggestion, have a job, learn to make games on the side, wait till it starts making you some money, and then when it starts getting you enough that it's self-sustaining, then move into your studio thing. But I would never quit a job to make a game. Personal choice.
I would just recommend get a job at a studio. Like, and if you can, if you're in an area where there are lots of game studios, or even some studios, like, before trying to start your own studio, if you can, get into a game studio that's around you, or a programming place, a software place that's using game engines as a secondary, like a backup. But I mean, if you're in an area where game development is a relatively active thing, I would look at that first. It's way easier to, I think, start a game company after you've worked at one and you've seen what it's like. You know more about what the insides are like, and you'll also meet a lot of people and get a lot better at game development when you're working with other people that actually have experience in the industry. I think that a lot of people think that being a game developer means that, like, you're your own person sitting in your garage by yourself with your artist friend, and you two make a game, and suddenly that game becomes a studio. And, like, most of the time it's people joining other people's studios, they build up game, they work on stuff for a while, and then some subset of those people end up splitting off and making their own stuff. And occasionally you get the random fucking super genius that just comes out and makes some giant hit and sells it for billions of dollars. But those are the those are the edge cases, and most of the people actually just kind of do some work in the industry first.
Yeah, I think that the Double Fine story is almost like the quintessential example of how to do it correctly. Like, you work at a studio with friends, you have a somewhat successful game idea, you have an idea that doesn't quite fit the mold of what the company's making, so you decide to split off, make your own studio, turn that into a full-fledged game. Bang, that's how you get Psychonauts, which, by the way, while an amazing game, wasn't a critical success. It didn't make them very much money, but it did start off an indie darling studio that went on to do well from there. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things just to be cautious of. But that wouldn't be my answer to that question. That's separately from that, which is kind of almost seems counter to what we just said. I think the biggest mistake new game developers make is not making games. So it's the truth is, a lot of people say they want to be a game dev, and they're like, cool, I'm going to make my first game. I'm just going to block 4 years of my life and start building a game. It's like, well, no, don't do that. If you're starting, if you're brand new and you haven't done anything, just make small games. Just make lots and lots. Like, my challenge to most people is, until you've made 10 things that are on a combination of itch or Play Store or somewhere online, don't like try to make your big game. Just make 10 things. And if you think 10, that's too many, well, then make 10 really small things. Make 10 Flappy Birds, 10 Tetrises. And you're like, but who cares? Who wants to play another Flappy Bird clone, another Tetris clone? It's not about them. It's about you. You need to understand the cycle of idea to thing for sale. You need to see people purchase it or interact with it. You need to understand how to publish in asset stores. You need to understand the cycle of how players play. You need to see what works and what doesn't. You need to understand level design and game design and sound design and a million other things. And the only way you do that is by doing that. And so make games. Don't try to make one game over 2-3 years. Start off by just making lots of small things. If you want to see successful examples, look at Blackthorn Prod. They start making tutorials, then they made a couple of games themselves, put those small games up on Steam, and slowly built up their studio and their development from there. So if you really want to do this, you will be a lot more successful if you make small projects, preferably game dev them and do like live streams or demonstrate yourself building them. Do game jams even, they count. And then once you've got your backlog of 5 to 10, then maybe you have enough experience to ask yourself if it's worth spending 2 years building a big project.
I would say that is absolutely true. I probably didn't make enough smaller games before I made I made 3 small projects, but learning more would have been tremendously helpful when working on the big project, the one that you want to succeed. Even if success is $20,000 in revenue, the one you want to get to make you money. Yeah, you don't want to mess up on that one. So having the background. But the other thing on that is, and I made this mistake, is not advertising your game as soon as possible, not getting a Steam page up as soon as possible, not telling people about it and letting them follow you as soon as possible. Because I learned the hard way that when you release your game, nobody cares because nobody's heard about it.
Nobody was waiting for it but you, right?
Not a single person.
You're the only one that's been waiting on that release date.
Except for the people who quickly got it pirated in China, and within 24 hours, I thought I was making tons of money because I had so many users on, according to Unity Analytics, I had like thousands of users, and I was like, whoa! And then it turns out they were all in China, and
I remember getting that same feeling. I was like, wow, this game has taken off. Like, we got 10 times the sales today or something. We got to weigh all these users. No, they're just in China, and they wanted to play a game where you had blood that could be pirated. Like, oh.
Yep.
Yeah, sad.
It took 12 hours.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost instant. There's probably just bots that just watch Steam and auto.
This was iOS. This was iOS, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Mobile.
Oh,
yeah, mine was on Steam. This is the same thing. It was right away.
Yeah.
So here's a question about scope creep, and I think this is something when we talk about problems that like a lot of junior developers and new developers and really all developers have. This hits everybody, and it says, I struggle a lot with scope creep. How do you find a good middle ground between small scope and still being excited to work on something? Are there constraint tricks, I guess is the question there. But how do you keep yourself from diving into scope creep problems. And for me, this problem usually presents itself a little bit differently than for a lot of game developers, because a lot of the time people want to add new features into their game or new functionality into their game. And for me, I find that a lot of the time I want to add new functionality and extensibility into my code that's not needed. And that's where my scope creep comes, instead of from like actual gameplay features. And personally, I have to be actually really conscious of this. I have to think about it when I go to put something in, when I start putting something in. I have to actively, consciously like take a look at it and make sure that this still makes sense. So a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll plan what I'm going to do, what I'm going to add into it. I'll write it down. I'll just make a little note in a to-do list. Now I use Milanote all the time, or I'll use a little piece of paper, or I'll start the class and then I'll step away for a few minutes and then I'll come back and say like, does this make sense? Or I'll start stubbing it out a little bit and then I'll come back and say, do I actually need this? Or once I've finished a thing too, I'll also almost always go back through and look and say, do I actually need all of these things? Can I rip them out? But when it comes to like a bigger actual game and you're putting in these features and you want to put in some new system, it's a lot harder to kind of stop yourself, because you can't just kind of quickly knock that stuff out. What do you guys do to kind of prevent yourself from adding things that aren't going to improve your game? Because I mean, for me,
Just
it's the
say
big things like,
no.
don't add stuff that's not going to make the game better. Like just as a quick example of scope creep, I remember building this mobile game, right? We built a PvP mobile game, kind of like a Clash Royale. Think of it as like a bad version of Clash Royale a decade before Clash Royale came out, right? One of the things that we spent like a month and a half on was an upgrade system where you could upgrade your units, and interface for it where you could fly around in a 3D world, see all of your units, see the upgrades visually on them as you upgraded them, and like have this whole interactive system just for upgrading your units that, maybe 100 people used once. Um, and it added like 2 months onto our development cycle and other random problems and constraints. And there are lots and lots of systems like that that I can think of in games that we've done, where we just add on crap that doesn't really improve or deal with the core of the game, doesn't make it any better, but is like a neat, flashy feature that somebody else had usually.
Sure. I think that's the skill involved in this, because really just saying no is a simple answer. Just say no to these things. But really what you really have to do is figure out, okay, one, how long is this going to take? And if you got to be accurate about that, if the more accurate you are, the better, right? And then two, is this, as you said, is this going to impact the actual gameplay in any way that makes sense? Is this just like a small thing that nobody cares about, or very few people care about? Or is this something that, even if it's a small thing, is going to make it, 10 times better, or just this one system better? And it could be an animated UI, it could be something else that you weren't planning for. I would say you've got to weigh those two options, because that's where you find out whether the time spent on it is worth it. Essentially, for the most part, just say no, right? That would be my theory, because there are so many things, and especially if this is your passion project, you can come up with these ideas and be like, oh, especially RPG, you got RPG Builder. Oh, they have a new pet system. I'm going to build a pet system in my game. Are you? Should you? Probably not. Just because it's there doesn't mean you should. And just because you have the idea doesn't mean you should execute the idea, especially if the other core aspects of your game are not done yet. That's a good quote there.
Yeah. Could I release this game without this feature? The answer is yes. Probably cut it.
So I'm gonna deep dive this one because I like this question. I would say the first thing that's important is to figure out why you're risking scope creep in the first place. And I think a lot of people don't realize there's vastly different reasons why you do this. The first one is magpie syndrome, where it's just you like the shiny new toy. Now, I see this all the time as a contractor, where you're working for a client and then you're doing some project and suddenly they're like, oh, I just saw this other project. Can I have that feature? And that's got its own problems, the ramifications to the game, but we'll go back to that later. That's one cause. That's probably the one you see more if you're contracting for other people. The one you probably see the most if it's you is quite frankly burnout that you might not be diagnosing correctly. If you've got scope creep, it looks like it's scope creep, but what it's actually is you're getting fatigued working on some system because it's not working properly, or it's too much work, or you hate it, or you're annoyed, or progress isn't going the way you want. And so you divert attention to something else. And that's considerably worse than scope creep, because that means you are avoiding a problem and you're adding more problems to try to solve the other problem by avoiding the thing you don't want to do. And so the first thing to do is ask yourself, why are you looking at new features? Why aren't you finishing the things that are there? And if the answer is because right now this sucks, it's not working, it's not doing what I want, that's a different problem. So don't try to solve that problem by tacking on more features. Stop and ask yourself, can I do this simpler? Maybe, do I even need this feature? But address the actual situation. That's one. Solve that first. If it turns out it is just like I have a million ideas and it would be fun, the main reason that's actually dangerous is think of your game like a bucket of paint. And every new feature that you want to add is messing with the careful balance of how the color of the paint works. So you might think, okay, I've got this red paint and I'm going to drop a little bit of green in here. This is our pet system. It doesn't work like that. What you've done is you've added a system, and a system will permeate your game and it can vastly change the feel of it. How someone interacts with your game, you can change the balance drastically. Here's a great example. Take a look at Shadow of Mordor versus Shadow of War. Those two games, Shadow of War was unashamedly built around microtransactions. They'll tell you it wasn't, but it was. They legitimately built that game such that you needed to use loot boxes and various things to play the game. Now, that's just a small add-on. Now, obviously, you can argue about the value of those kinds of in-app purchases. But if you even forget about it from that angle and look at it from the case of the balance of the game had to be adjusted to support the fact that you had to now find and earn these special heroes. The game changed, literally how you play minute to minute. The flow of the loop of the game changed because of this new feature. And every game does this. If you introduce farming to your game, that flow we talked about earlier will change. You've now added this low intensity portion of the game. And what I think a lot of people don't appreciate is every time you scope creep yourself a new feature, you're not only adding new things, they don't make a game better. They can, that's like your paint bucket. If you just keep adding colors, you'll end up with a dirty brown. It'll just constantly, it'll eventually get to the point that none of it works, because none of it works well together. It's a mess, and none of it, there's no balance, there's no progression. New features don't make a game better. And oftentimes, if you feel like you're adding new features, it's because of one of those two things. It's either you're burning out from what you're doing, or someone's got shiny new, this other game has it, so we should have it too problem. Or the third one is probably another one worth mentioning. Maybe your game isn't fun and that scares you. Maybe you're thinking, crap, I actually don't like my own game, or it's not entertaining, or people aren't engaging with it. So you just think throwing more features at the wall might solve the problem. Now it might, but again, that's not the way you tackle that. The first step of all of this is figure out what is the problem you actually have. Is it, I want new features? Is it, I'm burned out? Or is it the game isn't fun? And when you figure out what the problem is, you can address that problem. And if the problem is the game isn't fun, you might have to go back to your core assumptions and go, why is it not fun? Did we race too far in one direction without playtesting it first? And if that's the case, you might need to just white box a room with a character and a couple of cubes and find the fun again. Just have a bunch of players figure out the part that's the most fun. And last but not least on that note, go with what works. What I mean by that is you might have this hard and fast dream for your game, and you send it out to players to playtest, and they completely ignore the really complicated, drastic features you put into your game, but everyone goes over to the farming minigame and starts really having fun and ignoring, what about all this narrative stuff I put in? Or the other way around. You might build this really cool, a good example, I was playing a friend's game, and he has this big complicated building system, but I was just running around shooting things. I wasn't engaging with the building because his shooting was that much fun, right? And so that's not to say don't put the building in. It just highlights there's a problem at the moment with the building system, because very clearly the shooting is more entertaining for me. And so as a player, that gives you the advice of maybe I should look at that. Maybe I should see where players are engaging and use that information to your benefit. So if players are liking a part of your game, don't see that as a bug, see that as a feature. See that as oh, I have found something fun, and take that brush everything else aside, take the nugget of fun and polish that up to be the real part of your game. So yeah, step 1, why, and then step 2, solve that problem. Don't just arbitrarily assume it's scope creep. You know?
So you have to be willing then to abandon features, and that could include from scope creep, abandon this new feature that you've come up with, but maybe even abandoning your existing feature. And I've heard stories about games that had mini games that get spun off into their own game because people like that better. The one that comes to mind, it's an older game, Might and Magic 7, I think it was, had a card game that you could play in the various inns. It's called Archimage. And it was just an early card game, like any collectible card game today, but just very early. And I enjoyed playing it. And then I read later that they actually spun that into its own standalone game because so many people were playing it in game, spending all their time not playing the game instead of playing this little card game against the computer. So
you want the perfect example of this? The SimCity. Yeah. SimCity is a game where it was originally made because he was having fun creating this sort of, like, he wanted to design a simulation game thing, right? And so the thing is, the original goal of that game was very different than what it turned out to be, but people really enjoyed the, like, dropping disasters and messing with it. He put that in as a joke, as a, like, I built a simulation system, wouldn't it be fun if I could, like, destroy it and add different things? And people really enjoyed that. And it's like, oh, hang on a second, we're on to something. People enjoy interacting with the simulation. And so the entire SimCity, followed by the Sims franchise, was born out of a completely unrelated concept of building a simulation for how a city functions. Like, that's not the goal of the original project, because it was what was fun at the end result, you know?
Yeah. I think, yeah, there's a comment about Fortnite being dramatically different. I can think of games at Sony that we worked on that in beta or in alpha or early versions were a totally different game, or even a H1N1 or H1Z1 that Salim worked on ended up being a completely different game from beginning to end. So yeah,
Paladins. Paladins is another one that also is a game which had multiple different things. Realm Royale and the other ones too. And the parts of the game are popular, other parts no one plays, and a smart game studio leans into the bits players actually enjoy.
Was Minecraft one of those too, where it was like people started using it differently, and I don't remember.
I don't know how. I don't know.
I thought it was like originally was a zombie thing. Yeah, and then people started going crazy and started, because it's a sandbox, so people started doing new things that weren't expected.
Oh yeah, Minecraft took off because of the sandbox and the modability, being able to just customize it and extend it and make it into all kinds of crazy stuff.
And again, that's a funny side example too. It kind of highlights how sometimes the customers aren't always right. For years, the comments in Minecraft where people were like, man, I wish Minecraft had a story. That was like one of the biggest quote unquote complaints consumers had. And so eventually they added the end and all the other stuff and all the various things. And honestly, nobody really cares. That's not where the game makes its money. I'm not saying nobody plays it for the story, but not many people play it for the story. You play it for that sandbox environment thing. So it's always good to listen to your audience, but don't listen to what they say, listen to what they do, right? Mm-hmm. That's why the number one advice for playtest is record it if you can. And if you can, record their face, like have a camera on someone as they play your game. And no matter what advice they give you, like look for when they squint or they're angry, or like you can see where someone's like, this didn't work the way I expected to or something. And that expression is what's going to tell you the most amount of information. Are they happy? Are they frustrated? How are they engaging with it? So yeah, like listen to the way people feel about it. And I said this one before too, but I think it's one of the most interesting indications of someone's interest in your game. If they are giving you feedback in real time while they play it, they don't like your game. I mean, it may sound like they do because they're like, oh yeah, this is great. I like the characters. The combat's really good. The animation's good. If you liked it, you'd be playing it and not analyzing it in real time. If you have the mental capacity to sit there and start giving me critiques on what the animation should look like, you don't care enough about the experience you're currently playing to just engage with it. If you're enjoying it, they'll go silent and they'll just play the game, and then they'll be like, okay, your time's up. And it's like, no, can I play some more? That's how you know they actually liked it, because they've stopped thinking about the playtest and started playing the game, right? So it's interesting. There's a difference between what people think they think versus what you can actually see them do.
Yeah. That's the number one thing, seeing if they want to play more, right? Like if they ask to play again. Like if they don't, then their feedback's probably not going to be too helpful.
It's like food. If you say, hey, try this food, and people are like, yeah, okay, I'll take another spoonful. I'll use some more. They clean their plate. They liked it. If they take one bite and put it down and tell you, oh, it was a little salty, but it was good. Maybe next time add tomatoes.
Yeah. It was good.
It's a polite way of saying, I didn't like it.
Today. Yeah.
I'll have some more later. Yeah, it's fine. I'll do that.
Yeah.
So do you want to jump on to tips? You guys got any this week?
Unfortunately not. You see, recently I started a YouTube channel, and there's a new video at the moment on that channel as of today. So I haven't really had a lot of time for my usual tip lineup, unfortunately. So
your YouTube video, let's talk about that as a tip, because I mean your YouTube video is about the package manager, right? And package management. And it just briefly kind of give people an overview of why they would go look at that and understand it in depth, like kind of what are packages and why does anybody care if they're a developer and they're not using them?
That's actually a good point, because there's a lot of confusion around, especially because Unity uses packages twice, meaning two different things in two different locations, which is really frustrating. Even myself, I'll sometimes right click and go add package, and it'll bring up a file directory and say, oh, that's a Unity package. That's not a package. It's really annoying. So the structure for how this works is Unity has the asset store, and the asset store is awesome. We've talked about it at length earlier, and they've been using that for a long time. And effectively, that just bulk downloads a bunch of crap into your project. So that's what it does. You pick a thing, you pay for the license to use it, it drops it into your project. And it's been using that for a long time. The problem with that system is the way the folder structures and stuff work are entirely at the whims of the developer who made the asset. It just dumps stuff into your project. And let's be honest, a lot of people don't know what they're doing when they're designing and structuring a neat project. And so you're at the whims of the person who made the thing. And so in other industries, like a good example being web development, they've got something like NuGet, and that's a package manager. And same with if you're using C# and building applications and you're downloading packages, whatever else. The point is,
or NPM for Node developers.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. There's so many. Yarn is another tool that does the same thing. There's so many package manager solutions, but there's sort of like standards for how this works. And the way it works traditionally is you list the packages you want. I want this tool from this person, this tool from this person. And then what you do is the packages themselves might have dependencies. So fancy animated text might use TextMesh Pro. And so what you do is you track this chain of dependencies, and then you have a resolver. And a resolver will go through all the packages and say, okay, I need this, but I have a dependency on this, who has dependency on these, and they've got different and all this stuff. And it's really powerful because it means you can basically say, set my project up with all the 2D stuff, or all the 3D stuff, or all the animation stuff, and you can add or remove the bits you need. It's really cool, but it's a pain in the ass to use if you don't know what you're doing. And I'm not going to lie, Unity haven't made it easy for us. They're migrating their ideas towards package management, which is great. I think it's a good idea that moved in this direction. But at the moment, there's now two different supposed asset stores. There's the asset store that's the assets you buy and the assets on the store, and then there's the package registry. And the package registry are the things that Unity have given a thumbs up to. They're the nice, tidy, organized, structured things. You can also make your own packages as well. But the way it works is you do a search, you find the thing you want, you click it and add it to the project. And what's really cool about this, separately from the other assets, is it has a dedicated packages directory. So if you look at your project, you can actually have 0 assets in your project, but you have a package folder where all the packages go in there, so they don't mess with or muddy up your project. Really powerful, really useful. But Unity has made some choices for you. When you start a new project, it's got a bunch of packages you may not want, and it also doesn't have packages you may want for your project. And so the way you solve this is you go into this window, you open a thing, and then what it does is when you open this window, it pulls down a list of all available packages. And as you do searches, it pulls those down too. But what it's doing is it's pulling an online version. So it's finding the latest version for you, doing a search, doing all sorts of stuff, and it's time consuming. And every time you do a search, you have to click like 5 things. Do a search, click a thing, click install. Do a search, click a thing, click install. Go to your list of packages, click one, uninstall it. And again, and again, and again. And it can be kind of exhausting. And for someone like me who sets up the same structure in lots of projects, I want these 5 removed from my project. I want these 3 added and these 2 other things. I just wanted a button, a single button that would do that for me. And so I made one. And that is what my current video it talks about. How do you take this lengthy process of stripping out features like if you're doing putting textures from the web, there is a feature in for the www web yield request awaiter thing. You probably don't need that. There's a very good chance your game won't be downloading web textures. So just remove that from the project, make it a bit smaller, and get rid of that feature. You can always add it back if you need it. You don't need it to start. So there's a ton of these, like the XR core plugins, and another one, different integrations. By default, it starts with the Rider integration, the Visual Studio integration, the VS Code integration. If I know I'm using Rider, I know I'm not using VS Code, I can remove that integration. Right? There's like these little extra bits you can remove. And so, yeah, that's basically what I went through. How does this work? How do you add packages? How do you remove packages? How do you automate this process? How do you auto-resolve packages? Which is a lot to cover in 5 minutes, but I think I touched on enough that you get the idea to how to kind of customize it to your own stuff.
Nice. And I'll make sure we link that down below too. I sent out an email about that, but I'll make sure that it's linked in the description too. You can drop it in chat too. I had one that was kind of package related that I wanted to share. I talked to you briefly about this earlier, which was the Open UPM. So if you haven't seen this, it's a package site for Unity projects or Unity packages, and it looks like they've got 1,170 packages right now. If you go into the packages folder, you see that it's just got a bunch of different packages that deal with different types of code things. Some observable collections, generic Unity objects, some different frameworks for things. One of the ones that I used this for recently was Backtrace, pulling in the Backtrace integration, because you click on it, download it, and it's just there. It's automatic. It adds in a scoped registry. So when you use OpenUPM, it'll just add it into your own registries, which creates like your own custom registry that's not accessing it's not accessing Unity's, but accessing one directly for the project. Or I'm not sure if this one is specific for the project now or if it was specific for OpenUPM, but it allows me to just keep track of the updates and automatically update it, or come in here and just hit the button to keep track of it and update it. And I thought it was a interesting site to check out and just go look for different packages. And I kind of wanted to go through and see what other interesting packages were on here and what useful things are here. So definitely just wanted to share that one. You got anything, Andrew?
No, just the tip we learned earlier about audio and autoplay. I'm going to be using that at some point very soon.
Do you want to reshare what that was for everybody?
So that was, if you're going through audio clips and you need to hear them and you want to hear them up, there's a autoplay button near the play button on the inspector, so that when you select an audio clip, it will just play it. So you don't have to mouse over and click play and the mouse back select the next one. I haven't tested it, but
I'll screen share it real quick. Everybody can see. I've got it up here right now.
And while you're doing that, feel free to like the video. We haven't asked that in a while, so.
Oh yeah.
If you haven't already hit the like button, you probably should have already. You just go share it instead. Then.
Yeah.
It's too late to just hit like, right? No. Okay, so here's the UI. Here's the button. I've already clicked it. If it's off, you click a sound, nothing happens. When it's on, I don't know if you guys can hear those, but it's auto playing through.
I'll be honest, I had no idea that existed. There we go.
Me neither.
Lesson learned today too.
Yeah, I learned something new too. So thank you from chat. I forget who dropped that in there, but that was awesome. Very, very handy tip indeed.
And that comes from Jason saying he didn't know about it, and he told me yesterday he's the type who will click every button to see what it does. He didn't click every button.
Yep.
There's too many. There's a lot of buttons.
Sweet. Well, all right. I guess if we're out of tips, anything else you guys wanted to hit today before we wrap it up, or should we just say goodbye and see everyone next week?
I think everyone should go watch Jason Story's video. I'm going to, because I haven't seen it yet. And
Without a doubt.
yeah, I'm going to be doing a live stream tonight. I've been calling my morning and daytime streams coffee encoding. So I'm going to be doing a cocktail encoding tonight, because those nighttime streams are going to be cocktails encoding. And so
code that you have to delete tomorrow.
yeah, I probably won't actually be having a cocktail until I'm done with the stream, but I like the sentiment. So yeah.
Don't forget, as you said, try to set up some way so that when I'm trying to get something across in the chat, I can actually call in and like shout at you.
That's what. So yesterday, Jason was on the chat and he was giving me these tips, and I was not computing what he was saying. I think I was getting bits of it.
It's a very complicated topic to try to explain in like snippets of text in a delay. So
with a delay, because there's a delay between there's like, I don't know, probably 20 to 30-second delay. And so I was thinking, what I need to figure out, and Jason, maybe you can give me tips on this, is how I can send Jason a link, say, hey, click this, you'll come in, and he'll just instantly join, and suddenly he can talk real time and all that stuff. So I need to figure that one out.
Set up, I usually just see something like Discord, and if you're sharing your system audio through OBS, they'll hear me when I talk in through that. So but actually, just briefly on that then, just to highlight the brief summary of what I was trying to say, because we're here, as you said, people might be interested. So actually, do you want to explain what you were making first, and then I'll try to...
Yeah, so what was I doing? I was trying to, gosh, what was I doing?
So it was for the stats, and you were doing the, trying to surface the prefixes and suffixes.
Yes, but in a very specific fashion. See, I did so much yesterday. Now I've forgotten exactly what we were talking about. It was, so I've got every item has a prefix or suffix, and there was an issue with linking them, and the best way to link them together. And so I create a unique ID system, and then discussing how to best communicate this is this prefix object, and it's stored in a scriptable object, and I want to get that. So how to best get that, either through a name, which I was doing. So you could say the example was of Feeble Mind. It was a magic spell that you could attach to a book. So magic book of Feeble Mind. And I had hard coded the word Feeble Mind, but I misspelled it. And somebody in the chat had pointed out kindly that I was misspelling it. So I said, okay, well, I need to change this. And that started a cascade, because turns out, of course, a lot of these were hard coded. I just typed in Feeble Mind. So everywhere where there was a misspelling, there was now a problem. So I created a unique ID to solve for that, so that no matter what the name of the thing is, it can change, but everything that references it should reference the unique ID instead. And you were bringing up some concept that was probably good, but I was not getting it.
So it was kind of a complicated thing, but what I was getting at is a lot of the issues you're describing are a cascade of something called leaky implementation. And it basically means when two things know too much about each other, if you change the insides of one, the other thing has to change to compensate. It's kind of like having a plug socket shape on your wall. If you decide to change how the plug socket shape works, you would have to change the connecting plug to match. So you are causing a cascade of changes because something changes. And so what I was saying is, separate from the individual problem, there's a bigger issue here, which is something that can be resolved separately using the law of Demeter is sort of the name for this kind of way to solve the problem. So for example, say I've used this example of a delivery service before. Say you're delivering packages and there's a delivery service, and the delivery service is just a kid on a bicycle, and the bicycle has a little box in front of the bike, and you put your package in the box, and then off he goes and delivers it. If your code is the equivalent of this example, that's like saying deliverer dot bicycle dot bucket in front of bicycle dot place package. You are directly placing the package into the box, into the front of the bicycle. That's fine. It works. They'll go. But then later on, someone adds a motorbike, and there's a box on the back of the bike. That's where the packages go now. You have to now change your process, because your process was I understand. I go up to the bike and I place it on the front because I now need to know where the box is. So I now have to write a whole new line of code that says go to motorbike.backofbike.place package. Now, if you separate that out and say, imagine if I didn't talk to the box. Imagine if I talked to the driver and I said, hey, take my package. And the driver internally says, well, on my vehicle, the box is in front, I'll put it here. On my vehicle, the box is behind, I'll put it here. You suddenly have one less piece of information. Now, the way this manifests in code is with a dot. And so every time you write player dot inventory dot add thing, what you've done is you've said, I give things to the player's inventory. That's like saying I give things to the bike's box, rather than saying I give thing to the player who puts it somewhere, whatever they want. They'll put it wherever they want. So the way you have to reason about this is you want to avoid giving information. And so the example I was trying to get across in the chat is you have a concept of an item, which has prefixes and suffixes. These are internal information about how an item may be represented. And the problem is, by exposing item.prefix, item.suffix, you are saying items have prefixes and suffixes. And that's, to go back to the metaphor, that's like saying bike.box on front, bike.box on back. You're exposing that there are these things expressly on my bike. And if I want to add a new box, I have to put it somewhere. And now I have to make another line of code that says bike.backpack of driver, right? You have to make a new line of code for that. If you don't expose those details and instead say, can driver take box? If that driver has 1 box, 2 boxes, or 10 boxes, you don't really care. You care about the question, can you take this? Yes or no? If you can, take it off me, do something with it. So when it comes to the relationship, if you can figure out what the contract is that's broader, your code will be easier to work with. In your case, you don't really care if it's a prefix or if it's a suffix. You care that it's some attached information. If you had an item and say, does this item have an attribute of type magic or fire or, hardened? Then if I have this item, I could say, is this item hardened in some way? It is. Apply hardened icon or hardened effect or hardened statistic. Whether that hardened comes from a prefix or a suffix or a spell or a rune or an enchantment, that should be the internal details of the object. If you instead expose it, you have to say, if item.prefix is hardened, or item.suffix is hardened, or item.rune is hardened, and suddenly every change you make propagates, you're like quadrupling your work down the line. So wherever possible, if you can put a box around it and say, what is the question I'm really asking? I'm not actually asking if the prefix has X. I am asking, are you item X? If so, my code is suddenly simpler. And if you keep this principle going along, you end up with stuff like player, take thing. What do I do with it? Oh, this is wearable, I'll equip it. Oh, this fits in my inventory, I'll put it over here. Oh, it's a potion, I'll put it in my potion box. And suddenly you don't have to think about those details. And if the player has like an extra potion, like magic chest that sends it off to their potion shop and auto sells it if it's a certain type of potion, or they buy some magic spell which auto sorts their inventory and places it in different boxes, that can all be handled by the player. But every other thing is still just saying, here you go, player, here's the item. And it doesn't know about it. But if you expose player dot whatever, suddenly everything that talks to the player has to change to support the new features. And to bring it all the way back to the driver example, if I had a driver system where I'm like, hey, deliver my package. Here's the package, here's the address, figure it out. I could start with bicycles. And if later on the code someone invents teleporting and I add a teleporter that can teleport my package instantly, my process is exactly the same. I still pick my address, pick my package, hand it to delivery service. And if they're using a flock of pigeons or a teleporter or, a bike, I don't care. That's not my problem. And that means the code can scale infinitely behind this barrier. And in fact, I can even scale my side of it. What if I don't hand it directly? What if I give it to a friend and say, oh, can you deliver this package for me? So suddenly I can change how I do it. They can change how they do it. And neither of the two of them have to worry about each other. So it comes down to figuring out what that wall is. And that's called a boundary line. So you're trying to build boundary lines in your code such that you have the most amount of flexibility. And I've said this before, the reason for software architecture, the reason for all of this is to support change. Things will change. That's a fact. You will add prefixes. You'll later on add suffixes. You might even add runes. It doesn't really matter. you can't get the right answer first time. That's why I say don't sit down and write a million charts and graphs of your design. You won't get it right. What you can do is figure out what you need, draw a line, and then start making changes and try to keep the line the same. Now, it might change, but if it does, you'll propagate those changes. But wherever possible, keep the contract simple so all of this stuff can change. And you might think, that's really difficult, though. How do I find the right contract? You'd be surprised. Saving something, what is the contract for saving a thing? Save. Thing.save. Where does it save to? I don't care. Where does it load from? I don't know. So if you just have a save internally, it might be, oh, I save the text files. Actually, no, I save to the web. Actually, no, I save the first 20% to save files, and then I save the rest to the web, and then I compress this other part, and I put it over here, and then I back up this to... I don't care what you're doing. I call save, you save. I want to load it, you load it. Figure it out later. And then it's not your problem. It is still someone's problem. Someone has to solve it. But will I have to change if the saving changes? No, I shouldn't have to, right? So the more of your systems where you can say, I do X, I rely on Y, figure it out, the more easier your code will be to work with. Same with like weapons and tools. If you say player.weapon.shoot, you've always have to have weapons and they always have to shoot. If you say player.equip thing.use, you could equip an umbrella. You could equip a sandwich. Doesn't really matter what you're equipping. It's a thing you take, you use, right? So yeah, that's a lot to explain in a small chat box. So that's why it was hard to...
With a 30-second delay.
Yes, yes.
You're muted.
I was gonna say, to fix that, I would just use Restream and just give Jason the link, and then he can just hop in at any time.
Yeah, I think I need to start using OBS as well. I don't use OBS right now. I use Ecamm.
What do you...
Ecamm Live.
Oh, okay.
But everyone I talk to says OBS. They always just drop OBS. Oh, just in OBS do this. I'm like, everyone assumes I'm using OBS, so maybe I should use OBS.
Default, yeah.
I'm using OBS right now. It's literally what I'm on.
I use it for a lot of things, but for these, when I need to invite people, Restream is just 1,000 times easier. So OBS is okay, but then I've got to make sure that my audio is right on my thing. And if it's not something that I'm doing regularly, I have to like constantly go reset it up. If it's Zoom or Discord or whatever, I got to get it rearranged and perfect. But if you do it regularly, I think that's probably the way to go. You just get it set up, have it set one time, and you just pop your guests onto a single spot. But for me, yeah, Restream, I just send people a link and it just pops up. It seems so much easier. Although I don't think it's perfect. You lose some quality there on the video stream, I think.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but I assume that the desktop sharing quality is not as good. I should probably do some testing on that, though.
Well, given my potato internet, I've dropped my stream quality down to 720 just to hope that it doesn't stutter as much. So there's not as much robo Jason over the course of the video.
Cool. Well, I guess everybody should hop over and watch your premiere if they haven't already seen it now, and start getting Andrew's video queued up.
Yeah, if
you already have that posted, is that
I don't
available?
I'll do it right after this. It's gonna be tonight, probably about 5 hours from now, 6 hours from now, and you can find my YouTube. I think I have a nice custom URL now, but I can't remember what it is. But if you go to infinitypbr.com, you can click the YouTube link in the top bar. There's the
you
YouTube
need like
icon.
youtube.com/PBR.
I think it's Magic Pig Games. Or something like that.
MPG. There you go. You need something short, something easy.
Like in my case, it's literally my name. It's youtube.com/JasonStory. Now, people forget the E sometimes. It's STOREY, but it's just my name. You don't need any other magic. Just /JasonStory.
Yeah. I'm gonna take the other one, the one without the E.
That's funny.
Cool. Well, I guess thanks everybody for coming out and joining us. Please make sure to check out their streams and also hit the like thumbs up button. I got my I can't see my little thumb there. Can't see my little, there it is. Right underneath a little thumb in front of my light so that everybody remembers to hit it, but it's out of the scene. But yeah, thanks for coming out and thanks for joining us. Please hit the buttons, share the stuff. If you don't mind, just drop the stream up. And if you have questions or things that you want us to talk about, drop a comment down below. I'm trying to come up with just a couple themes and general things to discuss that I think are interesting throughout the week, and trying to keep notes of those. So if somebody has something they recommend and it pops up and seems interesting, it may end up just being one of our future topics that we'll
Yeah,
kind of dive into.
Like we'll have no problem sitting here and talking about this stuff forever, but if there is particular topics, if you give us a heads up, if you put comments below about specific things you want to cover, we can prepare. We can have notes ready and references and things. So let us know.
I'm starting to do a tiny bit of that preparing thing nowadays. I try not to do too much, but just a little bit. So, all right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and thanks Andrew and Jason for being here again. Always awesome. And I guess we'll see you all next week.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I'm gonna hit the weird buy button now to make some blobs go over our heads.
Bye.
See ya.